Chapter 43:23. At the request of his comrades, the driver said in a low voice, "Sit tight, don't go out." He stepped on the accelerator. Xia Jinyuan leaned back due to inertia, and the speed of the car instantly increased to 100 kilometers per hour. His comrades behind him all grabbed onto the side of the car, squeezing each other as they moved forward. It was like riding a roller coaster. The speed was so fast that their faces hurt when the rain hit them. The water ghosts had already made their move. The two squads of peacekeepers outside continued to keep a close eye on them. If there was any movement, they would immediately inform the people inside. This way, they would know what was going on outside, and it would be convenient for the water ghosts who were about to sneak into the mine. If they wanted to sneak into the mine, they would first have to pass through the electric fence. This was not difficult for the water ghosts. With the tools in hand, destroying the fence was easy. The mine was huge and protected by an electric fence. The illegal militants only strengthened the security at the entrance and exit of the mine. They did not keep a close eye on the surroundings. The water ghosts of the storm commandos found a breakthrough. They cut a hole in the electric fence and quickly entered the mine. Yi Qian, who was smaller than the male soldiers, was the first to enter. After entering, he immediately found a hiding spot and kept a close eye on the surroundings. When he confirmed that it was safe, he said softly, "Follow me." The water ghosts hiding outside quickly sneaked into the mine through the cut hole in the electric fence. The scouts, Seaweed and Sea Anemone, continued to lead the way. Behind them, Big Eel and Big Squid covered them. Yi Qian walked in the middle, and Demon King Li and the other three brought up the rear. The group of 16 people swapped positions like this, maintaining a high level of vigilance as they headed towards the mine. Yi Qian, who had already memorized the map of the mine and the various buildings, would occasionally act as a guide to get closer to the mine. The forest outside the mine was green, and piles of waste rocks could be seen everywhere inside the mine. They bent down and swept past countless piles of waste rocks, heading towards the entrance of the mine. There was no canteen, dormitory, office, or living area. The only place they did not go was the mine, so the possibility of the 12 Chinese employees being in the mine was very high. It was raining, and there were puddles of water in the mine. When one stepped into a puddle, the water instantly turned gray and turbid. Rainwater flowed down from the pile of waste, and there were small, winding streams everywhere. Normally, there would be employees to divert the water away. But now, the water was accumulating, and in some places, the water had already reached the top of the shoes. Yi Qian, whose military boots were soaked in the rain, stepped lightly on the sharp pieces of trash at the edges. He looked at the hand signals of his comrades in front of him and quickly moved forward. Everything was carried out silently. Every comrade was very steady, without a trace of impatience. This was the second time they had rescued a hostage since they arrived in Libya. Compared to the first time, Yi Qian could tell that the water ghosts were much more proficient. Their searching speed was also much faster. Concealment, spying, and advancing, they alternated between entering the depths of the mine. Right, 3 o'clock direction, for men's sentry position. Got it. There's still 1 kilometer left. Take the left side of the minecart track. There's a lot of waste, so it's easy to hide. Someone is hiding. The black shadow had already touched the track of the minecart that extended out of the mine with one hand. He immediately crouched down and waited for the sound of footsteps in the rain to pass. Not long after, there was a clanging sound. It was a minecart transporting or coming out along the track. Yi Qian raised his head slightly and looked in the direction of the track. The peacekeeping soldier who was watching from outside whispered, "There's a situation. 2 jeeps are coming." 6 people got out of the jeeps, holding small suitcases made of aluminum in their hands. They're Caucasians. They're too far away. I can't hear what they're saying clearly. The guy guarding outside is checking the toolboxes in their hands. Chapter 43:24. Yi Qian, who was lying in the dark, stared at the mine car that was driving away. His eyes narrowed slightly. 6 people came from outside, and a mine car immediately went out. Were they planning to bring the 6 people into the mine? Toolbox? Toolbox for inspecting special materials? 6 people Get back into the car and drive into the mine. As soon as the peacekeeper finished speaking, a cold voice followed. Follow the 6 people who just came in. We will arrive in 5 minutes. It was Xia Jinyuan's voice. They had already arrived and were approaching the mine on foot. The arrival of the Snowfield Brigade's special forces immediately eased the tense rescue atmosphere. They sneaked into the mine quickly. The 2 jeeps that entered the mine were still shaking as they drove. Several black shadows had already cut through the electric fence and sneaked into the mine. The black shadows were as nimble as a mountain cat. They were here 1 second and disappeared in the next. Their speed was so fast that the water ghosts were amazed. As expected of an elite ace, their skills were evident when they made a move. The jeep stopped, and 6 Caucasians alighted with umbrellas. At the same time, 4 well-built bodyguards with live ammunition alighted and protected the 6 people. One of the armed men reached out and shook hands with one of the Caucasians briefly. After exchanging a few words, everyone jumped onto the rail car and drove into the depths of the mine. Before the armed man jumped onto the car, he lowered his head and ordered one of his subordinates. Then, the water ghosts who were secretly observing felt that the security was tighter. A group of 12 people trotted toward the mine. The 6 people who came over, I'm afraid that Qing Yao was right about them. Big Eel said in a low voice, suppressing his murderous aura. I'm afraid that they are really here to inspect the materials in the mine so that they can know what kind of special materials China will refine. The 6 people didn't come as individuals, Devil King. They came as representatives of country. A country? I'm not sure about a few countries. There are more than 1 or 2 Western countries that don't want China to rise. Xia Jinyuan, whose elbow was hurt by the sharp scraps, smiled coldly. The murderous aura in his eyes was thick and dark. Brothers, we have to make sure they don't come back. Devil King, you are responsible for bringing the hostages out. I will handle the matters in the mine. The higher-ups ordered us to destroy all the equipment that was not transferred in time. We have C4 grenades and grenades. It won't be a problem to blow up the entire mine. Li Jinyan did not know how well equipped the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces were. He was looking in the direction Yi Qian was pointing. When he heard what Yi Qian said, he looked at the large red words that read, "Dangerous items, no fireworks allowed." The corners of his mouth turned up slightly. You have a C4, but we have grenades too. You'll need the power of several C4s to blow up a mine. It'll be even more powerful if you use a detonator that's used for mining. Yi Qian was already on the move. Together with her was the scout, Seaweed. Their destination was the gunpowder depot with the warning sign. How did he know that it was a gunpowder store? The words gunpowder vault were written below the 8 big red ones. As Yi Qian headed to the gunpowder depot, Xia Jinyuan began to deploy the escape route. He had his eyes on 2 trucks and arranged for 2 of his team members to sneak up to the trucks so that they could drive out when they retreated. E6 was tasked with keeping an eye on the exit of the mine to deal with the 6 Caucasians. If the 6 Caucasians were to be taken care of in the mine, they would shoot as soon as they saw them. The 2 peacekeepers did not let them continue to hide in one place. They ordered them to sneak into the power supply room and wait for orders to destroy the power supply equipment. Chapter 43:25. After entering the mine, Xia Jinyuan completed the entire combat deployment as fast as he could without wasting a second. After receiving the mission to rescue the hostages, Xia Jinyuan made countless combat arrangements according to the electronic drawings provided by the mine. Later, when he learned that the water ghosts were only armed with 1 rifle, he immediately overturned the first 3 sets of combat plans. In the end, the new combat plan also included the deployment of how they should fight in case something happened to the water ghosts of the Storm Commandos. Now that the water ghosts had been stabilized, they also knew how many sentry posts there were along the way to the mine and what kind of weapons each sentry post had. Now, the 2 teams had a total of 31 people. In addition to the 2 peacekeepers who destroyed the equipment and the 8 peacekeepers outside to provide support, there were a total of 41 people. They had more than enough manpower. The 2 teams had members who were responsible for long-range heavy firepower suppression, snipers, assaulters, explosives, and communications personnel who were responsible for communication. They had everything they needed. After completing the combat deployment, Xia Jinyuan began to rub his hands together. After he finished the deployment, he immediately brought the assaulters to meet up with Li Jinyan. Yi Qian had already climbed into the gunpowder warehouse. The originally locked door was hooked with an iron lock that had been pried open, and the seaweed outside was responsible for guarding. In the night vision goggles, Yi Qian picked up a detonator that had already been prepared and was just waiting to be used. His clear voice sounded in the ears of every comrade. There are enough detonators. They are all civilian TNT detonators. There are wires and detonating equipment. It won't be a problem to blow up the entire mine. With so many detonators, it wouldn't be a problem to blow up the entire mountain. Such dangerous items were actually not moved together with the equipment when the Chinese employees were moving the equipment, which made things convenient for them. It was not that the Chinese company did not move them, but the detonators were not important at all compared to human lives, so they simply did not move them. In addition, they were also afraid that something would happen in the mine. With the mentality that it would not be convenient for outsiders, even if it blew up, they moved all the detonators that were previously prepared to be used on another mountain into the warehouse. If something really happened, they would blow them all up. Xia Jinyuan laughed softly and said, "Let's see how many kilograms you can carry out. Don't be too greedy. Just move enough to blow up the mine." The people who were sent to mine were definitely military enterprises. With such a large amount of explosives, they were probably planning to blow up the mine. Military enterprises were often much more sensitive to crises than private enterprises, and they would not be soft-hearted when it was time to give up. Yi Qian also wanted to recite more, but Xia Jinyuan reminded her that she only needed to recite enough, so she only recited enough. However, to be on the safe side, she destroyed all the other 4 detonators. She took out 2 of them, one for her own use and the other for backup. Just as the 2 teams finished their tight deployment and were waiting to sneak into the mine, something happened in the cafeteria. Gunshots suddenly rang out. Even though the canteen was several hundred meters away from the 2 teams, the continuous gunshots could still be heard clearly. "Get down, Qing Miao!" Xia Jinyuan, who had specially come to the explosives warehouse to provide support, saw several illegal armed men rushing out. He immediately whispered to Yi Qian to stay on the ground. The gunshots alerted the illegal armed men in control of the mine, and they mobilized people to the cafeteria. There were 10 armed men guarding the cafeteria. They were squatting on the ground with their hands on their heads. Knowing that the government forces would not come to rescue them, the Libyan employees once again rebelled. This time it was not just a few of them, but everyone. The 10 armed men opened fire at the same time, shooting down a group of Libyan employees. Then they were pushed down by the Libyan employees who were still alive and stained with the blood of their compatriots. Chapter 43:26. The Libyan employees, who no longer pinned their hopes on the government forces, used their own methods to save themselves. In fact, it was also a kind of tragedy. They were so sad that they didn't even believe in their own country. Without weapons, they finally found a shelter. In the end, they lost the opportunity to escape because of their own fear, so they had to face it on their own. The Libyan employee who led the charge against the illegal militants was a core member of a nearby village. The main reason why he was recruited was to appease the Libyan indigenous people living nearby. Now, he led more than 60 Libyan employees and used his own flesh and blood to win freedom for himself. Even if he fell, he could exchange for the freedom of the Libyan employees behind him. They couldn't get out alive. These demon-like guys were even more annoying than the NRPL militants. At least the NRPL militants wouldn't aim their guns at the Libyan people. The cafeteria was in chaos. The surviving Libyan employees rushed out of the cafeteria. The illegal militants who received the news quickly rushed over to provide support and fired at the Libyan employees who rushed out. The Storm Commandos knew what was happening in front of them from the roars of the figures who were running in the direction of the cafeteria. At that moment, 2 of them almost rushed out because of anger in their hearts, but the other 2 black figures pulled them back in time. "Don't be rash, brother," A low, cold, metallic voice was heard. Li Jinyan immediately recognized that it was Xia Jinyuan's soldiers who were warning the members of the Storm Commandos not to be rash. "Remember our mission." Li Jinyan's jaw tightened, and his cold voice came through. "Enter the mine in the chaos, quick!" His eyes were so bloodshot that they looked like bloody pupils. In the darkness, the murderous aura that burst out from his bloody pupils was like a steel net with blades, as if he wanted to strangle all those bastards who aimed their guns at the civilians. In a public channel, countless people were breathing rapidly and chaotically. They were all water ghosts who went abroad for the first time for a mission. They were angry because the illegal militants pointed their guns at the Libyan employees. They really wanted to do something. Devil King, take your people into the mine in the chaos. You have to hurry. Compared to the anger of the water ghosts, the young Q King was surprisingly calm. The gunshots did not affect his mood. All his emotions and all his judgments revolve around rescuing people this time and how to maximize his benefits in the chaos. Who was he? He was a soldier who was ordered to carry out a mission. A soldier's duty was to obey orders. Therefore, he could not carry his personal emotions, let alone the emotions of a saint. The Libyan employees chose to resist. This was their choice, and they believed that it was the best choice. What about him? He was a soldier who had been ordered to carry out a mission and rescue all 12 Chinese hostages safely. He had to tell those who dared to directly make decisions against the Chinese side and do something that would endanger the Chinese side to declare war. Don't Kings stand on the Chinese side's head and behave atrociously. The sudden revolt of the Libyan employees brought certain advantages and disadvantages to the rescue operation. The advantage was that they could take advantage of the chaos to enter the mine. The disadvantage was that they could not confirm whether the Chinese employees were in the mine. Xia Jinyuan held Yi Qian's hand tightly and transmitted his voice to every Special Forces soldier on the mission through the public channel. Although they were happy to be reunited in a foreign country, they could only suppress the joy in their hearts and complete their reunion with just one look. Chapter 43:27. There was no time to say a few heartwarming words. To them, time was of the essence. After speaking, Xia Jinyuan loosened his grip on Yi Qian's hand. They had only held hands for a few seconds. "Our country's employees are waiting for us to save them. Your mission is to rescue them. Do you understand?" Li Jinyan knew what his team members were going through at this moment. He had experienced it before. This was the psychological process of growing up. After going to the battlefield and experiencing life and death, they completely understood how heavy military orders were. It was also a threshold that they had to cross. The moment they stepped out of the country, they would no longer revolve around training or carrying out missions in their own country. In the future, they would have more opportunities to go out of the country to carry out high-risk, confidential, and desperate missions. Brothers, this was the growth of a professional soldier. The water ghosts, whose internal organs were twisted in pain, began to move. It was too painful, so painful that they felt as if their roots were about to be pulled out of their chests. Their hearts, which had been beating faster due to indignation, were burning. However, they gradually burned into ashes because of Xia Jinyuan's words. The moment the Chinese peacekeeping soldiers who were keeping an eye on the periphery heard the gunshots, they thought that the Chinese soldiers who had entered the mine to rescue the hostages had been exposed. When they received the news from inside, they realized that it was the Libyan employees who had been imprisoned in the canteen who had risen up and resisted. At that moment, the peacekeeping soldiers who were keeping an eye on the periphery all held back their anger. They gritted their teeth so hard that they almost broke a few. The Libyan people who had the courage to resist in a lonely situation were the hope of this country. They would fight for freedom and work hard to survive. Even if this country was riddled with holes, there was a group of people who rose up for freedom and hope. The future would always be there, and they would never abandon the Libyan people. The gunshots became more intense, and the special forces of the two special forces heard it. Their eyes were filled with murderous intent. The water ghosts of the Storm Commandos approached the mine. Xia Jinyuan and Li Jinyan issued orders almost at the same time. Destroy the power equipment. A calm voice mixed with murderous intent came. The two peacekeepers received the order to pull down the main power valve and then destroy the entire power supply equipment. The entire mining area was plunged into darkness in an instant. The mining area that had lost its photo became a little chaotic. The sentries guarding the mine were also momentarily distracted. The water ghosts of the storm commandos took advantage of their distraction and the fact that these people did not have night vision equipment to blow into the mine like the wind. The storm commandos were already on the move. The special forces of the Snowfield Brigade had all found their positions according to their previous battle arrangements. Countless black shadows were moving about, waiting for a fierce battle to descend. Yi Qian, who was fast at shooting, did not enter the mine. Xia Jinyuan took out 6 grenades and handed them to her. It will be a fierce battle. Take a few grenades to defend yourself. Give me the detonator. Later, I'll lay down the mines, you stay on guard. Don't stray too far from me. Do you understand? Yi Qian, who had been following orders the entire time, took the grenades and handed over the detonator. Yi Qian then said softly, "Don't keep reminding me. You have to be careful too." His helmet suddenly lifted a little, and a light kiss landed on his lips. It was very, very light. It was just a light touch, and he had already raised his head. "Nothing will happen. I promised you. Let's go, Qing Miao. Captain will take you to battle." The female soldier who had grown up followed the mature and steady male soldier closely. She did not follow him blindly. Instead, she held her gun and was on guard for him and for herself. She had grown up, and Xia Jinyuan, who had been holding her hand as she grew up, could rest assured that his back was in her hands. Chapter 43:28. The 60 or so Libyan employees who resisted caused a lot of trouble for the illegal militants. The 10 rifles that were taken from the cafeteria were all AK rifles. The bullets would penetrate the target directly. Even if they didn't die, they would be crippled. The chaos created was huge. Most importantly, the Libyan employees were very familiar with the mine. The sudden destruction of the electrical equipment made it easier for them to escape. Some of them tried to escape to the exit, but they didn't manage to escape. Instead, they were shot dead by the illegal militants. On the other hand, the Libyan employees who escaped into the mine found a place to hide. Some of them hid and didn't come out easily. Those who had guns in their hands kept firing back. In the chaos, Yi Qian and Xia Jinyuan entered the mine at the same time. The two of them kept running forward until they reached a fork in the road. One fork led to the left, while the other led to the right. According to the drawings provided by the Chinese mining company, the left was an abandoned mine that was more than 140 meters deep. The right was a mine that had been mined in the past 2 months. It was similar to the coal mines in China. In the mine, other than a mine cart track that transported the ore out, there were various metal pipes of different sizes on one side of the mine. Some of them were even made of copper. The other side was a passageway that was usually accessible. Both sides of the passageway were covered with a metal mesh that was used to prevent stones from falling and injuring people. After entering the mine on the right, Yi Qian and Xia Jinyuan also found an engineering vehicle that transported materials. The engineering vehicle was a special vehicle that was specially designed to transport materials deeper into the mine. The entire vehicle was long, but it was very short. It looked like a flattened truck. There was also a huge black pipe above its head. It was mainly used to discharge air and provide oxygen to the deeper parts of the mine. The vigilant Yi Qian glanced up and saw the corpse of an illegal militant that had already been taken care of lying on top of the pipe. This was the guy that the Storm Commandos had secretly taken care of first. The channel was very quiet. There was still no news from the water ghosts that had gone deep into the mine to search for the Chinese employees. The situation outside was still unknown for the time being. The Snowfield Brigade special forces that were preparing for battle outside were silent. This meant that everything was normal and there was no need to worry. The resistance of the Libyan employees had attracted all the attention of the illegal militants. Until now, no Chinese soldiers had snuck into the mine and entered the depths of the mine. Xia Jinyuan began to lay down the mines. He placed the detonators directly on the top of the black oxygen supply pipe, starting from 10 meters deep into the right side of the mine. Finally, the metal wire used to detonate the detonators extended all the way out. Li Jinyan's cold voice came through the earpiece, breaking the silence in the public channel. All the hostages have been found. Prepare for support outside. The battle will begin in 5 minutes. That's right. Got it. Okay. The latest news made the Special Forces soldiers involved in the rescue look even more ferocious. The Chinese peacekeeping soldiers outside immediately sent the news back to the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Jenny City. At this time, the Chinese garrison in Jenny Rivi was being attacked by illegal militants. They arrogantly used loudspeakers to shout at the Chinese peacekeepers, demanding that the Chinese peacekeepers get out of Jenny City immediately. They used a humiliating scram and even omitted the word evacuate. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu, who had received the latest news from the mining area, contacted China amidst the gunshots. All 12 Chinese employees had been found and were preparing to evacuate. Just as Lieutenant Colonel Zhu contacted China, the bloody battle in the mining area had begun. All 12 employees were held at gunpoint in the mine. The person in charge of the Chinese team was shot in the thigh because he did not cooperate with the illegal militants. His entire knee was blown up, and he had been shot for more than 2 hours. Chapter 43:29. In order to prevent the Chinese leader, who was still useful to them, from dying, the illegal militants immediately stopped the bleeding after shooting his knee until 6 Westerners came over. The Chinese leader, who had lost too much blood, was cruelly dragged to one of the Westerners. Just as the Westerner wanted to ask something, the entire mine suddenly lost power, including the depths of the mine. The mine that lost its light instantly plunged into darkness. 2 of the illegal militants who were standing guard ran out to check the situation, but they were killed by the water demons who came over without a single drop of blood. The water demons of the Storm Commandos snuck in just in time to hear the threats of the illegal militants because the Chinese leader did not cooperate. There was a backup power supply in the mine. The special forces who moved close to the side of the tunnel first found the electric well box, according to the blueprint. By the time Demon King Li and the members of the Storm Commandos could see the Chinese employees and quickly hid in combat positions, the electric well box that was responsible for the mine's backup power supply was destroyed. What the hell are you doing? The last ray of light disappeared, and the guy who threatened the Chinese leader shouted towards the outside of the mine. At the same time, there was the sound of countless bullets being loaded in the darkness. The 6 Westerners who had entered the mine and had yet to start working were stunned at first. Then, the 6 of them pulled out their pistols almost at the same time and aimed at the darkness. The mine was too deep and dark. Even if someone was standing at a distance where they could hear the sound of breathing, there was no way to see the other party's face clearly. The Special Forces soldier outside heard a rhythmic tapping sound coming from his earpiece. It started with the word 1 and continued until the word 3 was played. After hearing the 3 knocks, Xiao Jinyuan shouted in a low voice, "Move!" Li Jinyan raised his hand, and dozens of black shadows rushed out. The first to be taken care of was the guy who pointed his gun at the Chinese employees. The Chinese employees were squatting, while the illegal militants were standing. This time, it was not an assassination, but a shooting. The Type 95 rifle fired continuously, and a magazine of bullets flew out. There were flames at the muzzle of the gun. Get down, all of you get down," Li Jinyan shouted in Chinese. The squatting Chinese employees were frightened by the gunshots and screamed, thinking that the bullets were shot at them. Then they suddenly heard someone shout in Chinese, "Get down, all of you get down." Their desire to survive made them react as quickly as possible. They threw themselves forward and lay on the ground, motionless. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of gunfire was particularly exciting. All the water ghosts fired their bullets at the targets they had their eyes on. They had also divided the targets under their muzzles in advance. Even the 6 Caucasians were not missed. The bullets hit the target, and the target fell to the ground. Some of the bullets hit the machinery used to mine the ore. The sound of metal hitting metal rang out continuously, and sparks flew everywhere. This time, the water ghosts were the first to attack. After the first round of shooting, almost all of the armed illegal militants around them were killed, including the guy who was holding a gun and threatening the Chinese representative a few seconds ago. He was the first to be shot in the head by Li Jinyan. The guy whose head was shot into a watermelon was the first to fall to the ground without even calling for help. Although the power outage allowed the armed illegal militants to load their guns in advance, the water ghosts were keeping a close eye on them and did not give them a chance to shoot. They continued to fire until they had no chance to open fire. "Let's go. Hold hands and follow us." They began to retreat. Chapter 43:30. Gunshots rang throughout the entire mine. Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian, who were hiding in the two forks of the mine, had their fingers on the trigger. Their cold, sharp gazes were fixed in front of them. Numerous figures who had rushed over after hearing the gunshots were instantly killed by the two of them. These were the illegal militants who were on sentry duty outside. The illegal militants in the mine were held back by the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade, especially the path into the mine. It was tightly guarded by the special forces, and anyone who wanted to come over and help the mine was killed on the spot. After 2 rounds, the illegal militants who wanted to come over were intimidated. Some of them wanted to inform the outside and let them know that they had been ambushed. In the end, they sadly realized that their communication devices had been blocked, and there was no way for them to contact the outside. The entire mine became even more chaotic. The peacekeepers guarding outside did not move because it was not yet time for them to act. They were the final cover for the retreat. Now that the brothers who had gone in to rescue the people had not come out, they had to continue lying down and waiting. Since it was the rainy season, there was plenty of rain in Labani. The rain had not stopped since the previous evening. The rain splashed down and hit the leaves. The intertwining sound of the rain drowned out the gunshots in the direction of the mine. The blood was also instantly washed away by the rain. The sound of an explosion rang out. The flames from the explosion surged forward and lit up a certain part of the mine. The wind and rain carried the smell of gunpowder. A group attack? Sons of Beatrice cheese, it's convenient to annihilate them all in one go. A cold and ruthless voice rang out from the public channel. Yi Qian, who was helping the storm commandos retreat, heard a deafening explosion a few seconds later. Follow closely, follow closely. Bend down, don't raise your head. Keep moving forward. Water Ghost Big Eel's voice could be heard through the earpiece. He, sea anemone, seaweed, and big squid, a total of 4 teams led the team to cover the retreat of the Chinese employees. Big Squid carried the Chinese person in charge whose right knee had been blown off. The last team to cover the retreat was Li Jinyan and the others. Quick, quick, quick. Don't look back. Just charge forward. The anxious voices of the water ghosts could be heard through the earpiece, letting all the team members who were helping them know that the situation in the mine was under control. The Snowfield Brigade Special Forces outside had plenty of ammunition. They threw out a few grenades and directly blew up a group of at least 20 illegal militants. The lethality of 1 grenade was not enough, so he threw 3 grenades at once. The explosions shook the ground, and all 20 targets were knocked down in one go. For those who didn't, those who reacted slightly faster were hit by shrapnel. Before they could get up, they were immediately reloaded. Assassinations and night raids were the strengths of the Snowfield Brigade's special forces. Facing these people who were ruthless even to the common people, it would be a waste to kill one more. The terrain of the mining area was complicated, and there were many piles of waste rocks piled up into mountains. It was hard to guarantee that a few powerful illegal militants would try to sneak up on the piles of waste rocks and attack them. However, although they had rushed to the mine with rocket launchers, heavy machine guns, and other heavy weapons, they had left behind a very important item: night vision goggles. The illegal militants who controlled the entire mining area probably didn't expect that they would be ambushed in the middle of the night. Moreover, the attackers had sneaked into the mining area under their control and started a fire attack from the inside. Therefore, even if they had heavy weapons in hand, they couldn't shoot accurately at the Chinese soldiers who had entered the camp. but the fully equipped Chinese Special Forces could do it. Chapter 43:31. Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian guarded the fork to the death, making it impossible for the illegal militants to enter from the outside. Those who still wanted to rush in the direction of the mine were cut off by the team members, buying time for the water ghosts inside to retreat. They had to retreat quickly. 12 minutes later, Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian met up with the water ghosts and directly suppressed them from rushing out of the mine. "Drive the car over." Xia Jinyuan ordered his comrade who had been waiting to drive the car to move immediately. They rushed toward the mine at top speed. The car's motor roared, and the snow-white high beam lights shone like two sharp swords cutting the darkness in half. The illegal militants who had entered the fierce battle noticed the situation and opened fire in the direction of the truck. The truck was like an agile snake turning in the mine. It was not driving in a straight line, nor was it driving directly on a road. Instead, it shuttled through piles of waste rocks, making it impossible for the illegal militants to aim and shoot. They could only shoot blindly. F***CK, block the truck, block the truck. D***M in it. Don't let them get away. Machine gunner, kill them. Kill them all. D**M in it. They're not the D**M in government troops. The truck was a big target. An illegal militant hiding in the dark set up a rocket launcher. After loading it, the guy with a gloomy gaze aimed at one of the waste rocks. Just as the truck was about to drive to the pile of waste rocks he had aimed at, the rocket launcher fired. "Rocket launcher, V8, fall back, fall back." The fired shell shot straight toward the pile of waste rocks with a long, fiery tail. The Special Forces soldiers M and T6 who had locked onto the west side immediately realized something was wrong. Their voices sounded like they were torn from their throats, full of ruthlessness. The V8 vehicle had already driven into the pile of waste rocks. Hearing his comrade's warning, he did not retreat. With bloodshot eyes, he swerved to the right, and the car shot out like a cannonball, rushing toward another pile of waste rocks. Boom! The anti-tank rocket launcher shell hit the pile of waste rocks. Flames and smoke rose into the air. The huge explosion flattened the entire pile of waste rocks, leaving a medium-sized crater in the middle. Countless broken stones and broken pieces splashed in all directions and hit the ground like a rain of stones. Everyone knew the power of a rocket launcher. Amidst the sound of the explosion, T6 shouted for V8. The two of them had always been partners whose lives were linked together. At the moment of the explosion, T6 felt like his life was about to end. V8, V8, the T6 combatant roared. His handsome face, washed by the rain, was so distorted that he looked like a different person. Everyone was waiting for V8's reply. However, V8's reply did not come immediately. The guy hiding on top of the pile of rubble saw that the pile of rubble had been flattened by the explosion. He slowly lowered his head and prepared to leave. M didn't stay where he was. He locked onto the location of the rocket launcher and rushed out with his rifle. He had to find that guy as soon as possible. He had to kill that guy as soon as possible. If there was a first shell, there would be a second one. Once the shell was aimed at the mine, all of their rescue arrangements would fail completely. When his military boots stepped on the puddles, the muddy water splashed everywhere. When he ran over the uneven gravel, there was a thud under his feet. Finally, through his night vision goggles, M saw two figures in that green world. Both of them were carrying something. One was carrying a cannon barrel, and the other was carrying a shell. The range was too far, and there was no way to accurately lock onto them. M sped up and rushed out again. However, someone was faster. It was Sniper E6. Chapter 43:32. Bang! The heavy sniper rifle's large-caliber bullet pierced through the air and accurately hit the guy carrying the shell without any deviation. The standing shadow instantly fell down. Even at the moment of his death, he didn't know how he died. When the guy carrying the rocket saw this, he reacted quickly and immediately lay down, rolling in the opposite direction of the sniper bullet. He knew that he had been hit by a sniper, and his companion had been hit by the sniper's bullet. He himself had been targeted by the sniper, and it would be difficult to escape. The rocket launcher had a keen anti-reconnaissance ability, and his speed was also very fast. Knowing that he had been targeted by the sniper, he rolled a few times and stopped moving. Even though his face was bleeding from the sharp rocks, he did not move and allowed the rocks to pierce deeply into his face. This was a guy who had made countless contributions to the anti-government forces. He was also a guy who was ruthless enough to shoot civilians as he pleased. Just because a child bumped into him, he used the dagger in his hand to cut off the child's head and tossed it around for fun. His hands were stained with blood, and his heart was trembling slightly. He was not sure if he could escape from the sniper's muzzle. He looked viciously at his companion, who had been killed by the sniper. He did not care about his companion's death. What he cared about was whether he could get the shell to his side. M did not give him a chance. Although the E6 had locked onto the entire sniping range, the other party had slyly rolled to the other side, blocking his line of sight. He wanted to change sniping positions, but M told him to leave the guy who was still alive to him. I'll make sure he stays on top of the rocks forever. Don't even think about staying alive until dawn. M, whose eyes were so cold that ice was about to fall off, said in a low voice. After he finished speaking, a muffled voice that sounded like someone was covering their mouth with difficulty followed. Damn it, M, help me kill that bastard. The V8 was still alive. He drove too fast and made a right turn into the pile of rocks. In the end, he was still a step too late. The windshield on the driver's side was shattered by the flying rocks and debris. All kinds of debris smashed toward the left side of his face, and his vision was temporarily affected. Just a second before he lost control of the car, he stepped hard on the brakes. The result was his head knocked against the steering wheel, causing his vision to turn black. His surroundings became very quiet for a while, and in the next moment, it was as if countless bees were buzzing around. He seemed to have heard the shouts of his comrades, but he also seemed to have missed it. His vision was blacked out, and he even had a breath stuck in his chest. For a while, he was unable to speak normally. He didn't answer immediately, which scared his comrades. Now that he had spoken, all the team members heaved a sigh of relief. When the T6 combatant, who had lost half his soul, heard the familiar voice, he heaved a sigh of relief. He did not speak again and aimed his gun at the enemy who was firing at them. Xia Jinyuan, who had successfully reached the entrance of the mine and was about to rush out, shouted fiercely, "If you're not dead, hurry up and drive the car over." Yes. The V8 driver, who was still alive, released the brake pad on his shoe and stepped on the accelerator. The rumbling sound of the truck's engine was heard again, and this time it reached the ears of the armed illegal militant who was still crouching on the ground. The moment he heard the sound of the car's motor, the illegal militant's eyes flashed with disbelief and anger. He thought he had killed someone, but in the end he hadn't. There was nothing more discouraging than this. However, what was even more discouraging was yet to come. M, who had locked onto him, pressed his lips together and raised his rifle. Chapter 43:33. The soldiers of the Snowfield Brigade were skilled at shooting people in the back, but if they were shot in the back, it would be a different story. While the armed men were still trying to figure out how to retrieve the shells, M, who had set up his rifle, opened fire. He wasn't going to play around. Things that needed to be settled in one shot had to be settled in one shot to avoid wasting bullets. Bang! A single bullet was fired. The tip of the bullet turned the raindrops into mist and flew straight for the target's head. The brain was the most important part of the human nervous system. The central nervous system was the most active. If the brain was damaged, it would either cause death or paralysis. The bullet passed through the back of the head and exited between the eyebrows. Red, white, and brain fragments flew out together. Before they reached the ground, they were washed away by the rain into the cracks of the waste rocks. The person was still lying on the ground and didn't have the chance to get up. After taking care of the target, M gripped his rifle tightly and quickly retreated from the top of another pile of waste rocks. He had to clear the area now. While retreating, M ran into a Libyan employee who was also holding a gun and was nervously hiding in a corner. M didn't alert him and chose to avoid him. The surviving Libyan employees were now hiding. Even if they had stolen guns, They hid them because they realized that someone was killing those damn people one by one. V8 drove the truck straight and quickly entered the area cleared by the Snowfield Brigade. He was getting closer and closer to the rescued Chinese employees. Xia Jinyuan detonated the detonator, and a huge explosion came from the entire mountain range. The mountain collapsed, and the ground cracked. The entire mining area shook. Boom, boom, boom. The mine collapsed. Even the entire mountain showed signs of collapsing. The people inside, including the 6 Westerners who were specially sent to check, were all buried in the mountain. This unforeseen event stunned the armed men who were still fighting with their guns. They finally realized that things were worse than they had imagined. When they thought about who else was in the mine, the armed men began their final frenzied attack. Get in the car! Get in the car! Hurry! Get in the car! Amidst the earth-shattering sounds of gunfire, the water ghosts pulled the 11 Chinese employees into the car one by one. The person in charge, whose knee had been blown up, was one step ahead of them. At this moment, he was covered with a tarpaulin. The 12 Chinese employees got into the truck, and the 15 water ghosts who were protecting them got into the truck as well. The rescued Chinese employees were all lying on the ground, while the 15 water ghosts, including Captain Li Jinyan, were all kneeling with guns in their hands. They squatted in all 4 directions of the truck, suppressing it with their firepower as they rushed toward the entrance of the mine. All hostages have been successfully rescued. Retreat now. Retreat now. Support us from the front. Support us from the front. The password was repeated, and the truck retreated as fast as it could. V8 drove, while Li Jinyan, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, was responsible for clearing the debris. The car rushed out of the rain and rushed to the Chinese camp with the 12 Chinese employees who had survived the disaster. The peacekeeping soldiers guarding outside began to move. Now it was their turn to come out and receive the hostages who had all boarded the car. Another round of fierce fighting began. Grenades were used to blow open the metal gate of the mine, and the armed men who tried to resist and stop the retreat were killed one by one. As for the Libyan employees, it was most suitable for the Chinese peacekeeping soldiers to come out and comfort them. In stiff English, he told the surviving Libyan employees to leave this place immediately and not to stay any longer. Amidst the sound of gunfire, the surviving Libyan employees finally rushed out of the blasted door under the cover of the Chinese peacekeepers. At that moment, they knew that they had successfully survived. At the most critical moment, the Chinese peacekeeping soldiers stood up and let them leave alive. Chapter 43-34. Another truck drove out. This time, it was to support the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces who were still fighting in the mine. Retreat, retreat. I'll cover, you guys retreat. Where's the captain? Captain, say something. What do you mean? I'm with Qing Yao. Let's retreat quickly. F*CK. Aren't there heavy machine gunners? Why isn't there any movement? F*CK. Wait for you to remember? F*CK, where are you? Why don't I see you? The rescue of the hostages was successful, and even the channel became lively. The cooperation of the soldiers of the 2 special forces could be said to have wiped out a large number of people. Other than the illegal militants who had escaped and hid far away, the rest were all wiped out, leaving no survivors. If they had only relied on the water demons of the Storm Commandos to sneak into the mine to rescue the hostages, how could they have succeeded so quickly? They did not have enough manpower and weapons, and they might even have to report the number of casualties. When the water demons who had already rushed out of the mine heard the cheerful voices of their brothers, deep smiles appeared on their resolute faces. It was good to leave alive. The special forces of the Snowfield Brigade started to get into the vehicles. Yi Qian was the first to jump in, followed by Xia Jinyuan. The truck retreated according to the planned retreat route. Along the way, they picked up their comrades and jumped in one after another. One by one, they retreated safely. The remaining illegal militants didn't dare to exchange fire anymore. They didn't gather together, but scattered to the east and west. Faced with an opponent who had more firepower and strength than them, they didn't dare to show their faces easily. There were about 100 illegal militants who had entered the mine, while the Chinese Special Forces had 31 people. Even if the enemy had twice the number, they were still at a disadvantage. It should be known that the ability of a Special Forces soldier was far superior to that of a normal soldier. In battle, a Special Forces soldier could fight against more than 5 normal soldiers. Therefore, even if the illegal militants had more people, they would lose without a doubt. Of course, there was another important factor. The other party did not expect that the Chinese side would be able to send out peacekeepers to rescue the hostages, and they did not expect that it would be the Chinese Special Forces. They thought that by restraining the 2 Chinese peacekeepers stationed in Jenny City and Cowell Town, the Chinese side would not be able to send out any extra troops. They thought so, and so did the Western countries who were cooperating with the illegal militants. The United Nations was still condemning the cruel acts of the illegal militants and trying to make them remember the peacekeeping regulations. The Chinese side had already solved the biggest problem. Just as the illegal militants were still trying to threaten the Chinese side, demanding that the Chinese peacekeeping forces in Libya scram back to China and give them the right to operate the mine and all the equipment, the special forces sent by the Chinese side had already left the mine with the hostages. Not only did they successfully rescue the hostages, but the Chinese peacekeepers also brought back the surviving Libyan employees. Instead of riding in the same car, they left in 2 hidden trucks. When the Libyan employees got on the bus and learned that they would be settled in the camp of the Chinese peacekeeping forces, their eyes were filled with tears and a deep sense of security. The country did not give them a sense of security, but the peacekeepers did. They stayed close to each other without saying a word. They leaned on each other until they were further away from the mining area. Chapter 43:35. The mine had collapsed, burying the people and machines together. In other words, this place would become an abandoned site and would never be reopened. 5 kilometers away from the mine, the Snowfield Brigade and the Storm Commandos switched vehicles. The Snowfield Brigade would protect the rescued Chinese employees, while the Storm Commandos would rest in another vehicle. A total of 4 trucks were driven out. The Snowfield Brigade also split into 2 groups. One group was with the Water Ghosts, and the other came out to protect the hostages. As for Yi Qian, she was with the Storm Commandos, so she naturally had to return to the team. However, she did not return. She was pulled back by Xia Jinyuan and continued to stay with Xia Jinyuan to protect the Chinese employees. The Chinese employees who got into the car looked back at the mine, where they had lived for almost a year. A technician cursed under his breath. He felt helpless, angry, and most of all, sighing. A worker beside him patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "Don't curse. We'll just move to another place. At least we're still alive. As long as we're alive, what's there to be afraid of?" A year of exploration, a year of mining, and it was destroyed overnight. Sigh. The technician scratched his head and wiped the rain off his face. He gritted his teeth and said, "I don't know where those bastards got the news from. It doesn't matter if it's destroyed or not." The technician was responsible for the mechanical technology. He had been following the machinery from the mining to the mining process. He was a witness when the desired resources were extracted. Now that the hard work he had put in had to be destroyed because of the outside world, he was so sad that he secretly cried a few times. He was very scared when he was kidnapped, but he really did not cry. Now, he secretly cried until his nose was stuffed. It's okay. Everything will be easy as long as we're here. Let's ask about Ding Gong's injury first. I don't know if his leg can be saved." The technician glanced at the temporary shelter created by the 4 Chinese peacekeeping soldiers who were half squatting and holding onto the waterproof cloth. He stared at it for a while before turning around and whispering, "They should still be working on it. Let's ask them later. I don't know if Ding Gong's leg can be saved." Sigh. The technician sighed. It was not up to them to decide whether the leg could be saved or not. They would have to wait for the military doctor's opinion. Let's rest for a while. We'll ask the military doctor when he comes out. The Chinese employees who were sitting next to each other heard this and did not speak. They leaned against each other and staggered out of the rainforest in the rain. The rescued Chinese employees did not know that the rescuers were special forces sent by the country. They had always thought that they were peacekeeping soldiers. Even a worker who was treating the wounds at this moment thought the same. In the end, he was hit by a bullet and knelt on the spot. The Chinese staff saw him in so much pain that his facial nerves were twitching, but he did not make a sound. When he asked what kind of ores this mining factory opened, the worker said several types, such as gold, copper, manganese. He even handed over a list of materials that he always carried with him and told the other party that they had just sent out a batch of manganese the day before yesterday. It wasn't much, only about 50 kilograms. Afraid that the other party would not believe him, he even showed them the text message on his phone. Because of Ding Gong's cooperation, the illegal militants who kidnapped them did not give them too much trouble. They asked the other Chinese employees, and since Ding Gong said so, they all went in this direction. In the end, even they themselves believed that they were only mining gold, copper, and manganese. Chapter 43:36. In the end, the ones who didn't make it out alive weren't just normal workers. They were all regular workers in the military chemical factory. Although they weren't soldiers, they had all received formal training. From the moment they were kidnapped, they knew that even if they were going to die, they had to bite their tongues and not say anything. If he really King said it out loud, it wouldn't just be an ordinary infamy. Now, they had saved the people and didn't say anything. As for the mining factory, when the worker took out the list of materials, they had a vague idea of what was going to happen. Thinking about the transfer of machinery, the scope of their idea had expanded. The mining factory was going to be destroyed sooner or later. The worker who had lost a lot of blood was still being treated. The car drove 10 kilometers away from the camp. The Snowfield Brigade's Special Forces soldiers arranged the guards and immediately covered the worker with a waterproof cloth to give him first aid. They were all trained in battlefield first aid. In order not to waste time, they treated the worker's wound quickly and roughly. K7 looked at his comrade, who was removing his bandage. Finally, he poked his head out and asked Yi Qian, who was in charge of security, to help. At this moment, Yi Qian became K7's assistant. He cooperated with K7 to treat the worker's gunshot wound. Yi Qian saw the worker's broken knee and looked away. The injury was very serious. The entire kneecap was shattered. The bullet was embedded in the bone between the calf and thigh. K7 couldn't take it out. Although it was unfortunate, Yi Qian felt lucky. It wasn't a bullet from a rifle. It was a bullet from a NATO handgun. K7 couldn't take the bullet out. The environment didn't allow him to do so either. The painkillers worked. When they were cleaning the wound, the worker woke up. He didn't feel much pain. He had fainted after being carried into the car. When he woke up, the first thing he asked in a hoarse voice was if they were all alive. After receiving Yi Qian's nod, he instantly heaved a sigh of relief. His entire body relaxed as he lay down and said, "One leg in exchange for 11 lives." It was worth it. K7 didn't say that he might have to amputate his leg, but the worker said it himself. Yi Qian pursed his lips and said softly, "It's not at the stage of amputation. Don't think too much." He didn't want to comfort him. It's okay, as long as he's still alive. The worker in his 40s was very open-minded. He pulled his bleeding lips and smiled. "I've been to 2 war-torn countries. I've seen too many gunshot wounds. The closest I've seen was the first time. When I returned to the unit, I had nightmares for half a month. It's better to be alive." As long as he was still alive, amputation was not an issue. In my line of work, as long as your brain isn't damaged, everything is negotiable. Even so, Yi Jian could see that Ding Gong's clenched fists were trembling. K7, who had a cold personality, did not know how to say comforting words, but he had already noticed the worker's fear. His brows furrowed slightly, and he seemed to be trying very hard to come up with a few comforting words. In the end, he pursed his lips and only said one sentence. "Many soldiers are not as brave as you." Their jaws almost fell to the ground. It was late at night, and the sun wasn't rising from the west. K7, who always worked and didn't talk, knew how to comfort people. Even though they were his comrades, they didn't get a single word of comfort from him. Yi Qian didn't know. He thought that although K7 didn't talk much, he was good at being concise. K7 didn't think he was comforting the injured. He was just telling the truth. Chapter 43:37. Even for soldiers in the combat unit, it was normal that they had never seen a gunshot wound in their 2 to 3 years of service. As for the worker, he had been to 2 war-torn countries and had seen a wound that did not even cover half of his chest. That was the power of a large caliber 12mm bullet. After a long while, he finally managed to squeeze out a few words of comfort. However, this sentence of comfort made the worker's eyes brighten up. Wasn't it true? He was much braver than many soldiers. Yi Qian secretly gave K7 a thumbs up. Not bad. He knew how to comfort people. K7 accepted Yi Qian's praise calmly. He had spent so much effort to say that, and he was praised. Could he say that he was embarrassed? Of course not. There was no blood bag. After stopping the bleeding, stopping the pain, debriding the wound, and disinfecting the wound, Yi Qian bandaged the worker's wound. Once he was done, he half-squatted and lifted the waterproof cloth to make it easier for K7 to treat the wound. His comrade sat down and covered the worker's body from head to toe to prevent the rain from falling on his body. After the worker's wound was treated, the 11 Chinese workers who were waiting saw the military doctor move out. With the technician as the representative, he softly asked K7 if there was a need for amputation. K7 looked at the Chinese worker who was talking to him. He thought for a while and answered simply, "He's fine for now. He's asleep." He did not say anything else. Fine for now? That means he's fine for now. There's no need for amputation. The 11 Chinese workers were laughing and crying at the same time. Just like that, their emotions fluctuated like a flood. They laughed and cried while expressing their gratitude. The technician held K7's hand and cried until K7's back was as stiff as a steel plate. K7's back was as straight as a pencil and did not move at all. This was the first time K7 had encountered something like this. He did not know how to deal with it. He wanted to ask for help, but then he realized the 11 Chinese workers were holding his 11 comrades' hands. They were all crying like children. Perhaps it was because G3 was about to become a father, but he patted the back of a Chinese employee with a benevolent look on his face. Yi Qian almost got a handshake as well, but someone reacted quickly and pulled his comrade X, then pulled Yi Qian back. Caught off guard, X was shaken by the Chinese staff, while Yi Qian was pulled into someone's arms. Yi Qian was caught off guard. Coupled with the shaking of the car, he was suddenly pulled and fell into Xia Jinyuan's arms. The back of his head slammed into Xia Jinyuan's jaw, causing both of them to gasp. His jaw hurt and the back of his head hurt. The good thing was that Yi Qian was now sitting in Xia Jinyuan's arms. His back was firmly leaning against Xia Jinyuan's broad chest, and he was hugged tightly. Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows in surprise. His original intention was to pull her away so that she wouldn't be hugged by other men. Who knew that he would end up benefiting himself? Benefits fell from the sky. How could he not cherish them? Humans should cherish their blessings. Therefore, Lieutenant Colonel Xia decided to be a man who cherished his blessings. He held the gun with one hand and wrapped the other around Yi Qian's waist. The only thing that made him a little unhappy was that the tactical vests they were wearing were in the way and did not allow them to be more intimate. "Are you throwing yourself into my arms?" The man who cherished his blessings chuckled and whispered into Yi Qian's ear. "Comfort in battle? Not bad, I like it." After the business was over, Xia Jinyuan decided to relax. How could he be so tense? He would age easily. He should relax when it was time. Chapter 43:38. There wasn't much time to relax. Xia Jinyuan had always been good at using his time, so he wouldn't miss any chance to relax. After 2 consecutive maneuver battles, even an Iron Man like him couldn't take it anymore. He urgently needed to rest and catch his breath. He dared to relax like this, but Yi Qian didn't. She didn't care about the pain at the back of her head and hurriedly said, "Everyone is watching you closely. How dare you touch me? Let go." As she spoke, she tried to pry open the iron arm around her waist with both hands. "No one is watching. Everyone is busy." Xia Jinyuan wouldn't let her. Even with one arm around her waist, he still had enough strength to hold her down and not let her escape from his arms. His voice was a little hoarse from the smoke, but it was soft and seemed to have a thin hook that went straight to Yi Qian's heart. Even though she knew that they might be discovered, she couldn't bear to push him away. Therefore, she didn't use all her strength to pull his arm, making it easier for Lieutenant Colonel Xia to have his way. 2 consecutive maneuver battles. Baby, let me lean on you. I'm a little tired. Yi Qian, acting spoiled again. She didn't even know how to act spoiled. The spoiled Yi Qian had no choice but to stop pulling his arm. Even her voice softened. Does it hurt? I can feel the pain at the back of my head, even with the helmet on. Even her helmet was hurting from the impact, not to mention his jaw that had been hit. It hurt a little, but it wasn't a big deal. However, since his girlfriend was so concerned, Lieutenant Colonel Xia nodded solemnly and said with a little grievance, "It hurts. Your chin is bruised." I almost cried. It can't be that serious. Thinking of the pain in the back of her head, even when she was wearing a helmet, Yi Jian felt a little uneasy and raised her hand to touch his shoulder. Just as her fingers touched his jaw, she heard his faint gasp again. It really hurt. It wasn't fake. Don't touch it. It still hurts. You hit yourself so hard. It's going to be bruised tomorrow. If you didn't pull me just now, I wouldn't have hit myself so hard. The stubble on his chiseled jaw was a little prickly. Yi Qian's heart ached as he spoke. He didn't dare to use too much force with his fingers and only stroked it very gently. Go back to the barracks and see if there's any ice. Use some ice and see if it can alleviate the bruises. Although she said that, she looked around vigilantly. Fortunately, her comrades in the same car were comforting the 11 Chinese employees in the same car, especially G3. Yi Jian glanced at them a few times and felt strange for no reason. Why did it seem like they were comforting children? She was only distracted by G3, but Xia Jinyuan, who was hugging her from behind, seemed to have seen her directly. He chuckled and explained, "G3. Impressive." He went back home on vacation for half a month and used all his strength to torment his wife every night. I didn't expect that he would torment her until she had a baby. Sister-in-law is more than 2 months pregnant. Originally, she wanted to tell us after 3 months, but she was overjoyed when she received the news. She only told us before we left that she was going to be a father soon. She even said it a few times, but she almost couldn't hold it in. Right now, he's looking like a loving father. Just take it that he's becoming a father in advance. Without explaining, Yi Qian only felt that G3's actions were a little strange. After listening to his explanation, she felt very immersed in the role. It was just like what Captain Xia said. G3 was going to be a father. What a joyous occasion. He's also the first father in our team. Now, all the veterans in our team have been unilaterally declared as godfathers by him. I feel very helpless. He's still a child. How did he become a father? He spoke quite seriously at the beginning, but towards the end, Yi Qian couldn't help but pinch his thigh. Lieutenant Colonel Xia, who was caught off guard, almost cried out in pain. Chapter 43:39. Pinch his thigh. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Be gentler, gentler. Yi Qian did not loosen his grip, so Lieutenant Colonel Xia begged for mercy. I won't say it, I won't say it. I'm just explaining it to you. I don't mean anything else. Can you loosen your grip too? Yi Qian, who did not stop, asked him with a smile. Yes, yes, I'll loosen my grip after another minute. Just one more minute. Between pain and benefits, Comrade Xia Jinyuan stubbornly chose benefits. Pain was nothing. Soldiers were not afraid of hardship, tiredness, and pain. There was pain every day, but hugging a girlfriend was not every day. Yi Qian was both amused and angry. He was really, the more mature he was, the more thick-skinned he became. In the end, Yi Qian could not bear to see him in pain, so he loosened his grip and said, "Stop fooling around. Have a good rest. We still have to make a detour back to Cowl Town. We don't know if anything will happen on the way, so take the time to rest and recuperate." The sobbing around them also became much softer. They were all grown men, so they couldn't help but wail for a moment. Now that their tears were flowing, their fear was also released. How could they continue to hold onto the hands of the peacekeepers who had saved them and cry? When they loosened their grip, they kept apologizing and thanking them, leaving the Snowfield Brigade's Special Forces soldiers at a loss for a while. On the surface, they still had to act cool and express that they had done what they were supposed to do. Yiqian could not help but laugh a few times as he watched. Her comrades were very powerful, but they were also very cute. The Chinese employees, whose bodies and minds were completely relaxed, gradually quieted down. They closed their eyes and fell asleep soundly with the rocking of the vehicle. It was raining, but their drenched clothes did not stop them from falling asleep. With a group of Chinese soldiers who were willing to sacrifice their lives to save them, they could also sleep peacefully. The Special Forces soldiers who had been operating continuously were extremely tired at this time. When all the Chinese employees fell asleep, Yiqian's cute comrades finally dared to move their long legs and hands that were slightly numb. Standing firm, moving like the wind, sitting like a clock. In front of the people, the image of soldiers could not be destroyed. Now that the people were asleep, they all heaved a sigh of relief. Oh my God, this is even more tiring than running 10 kilometers. The T6 combatant swung his arms and said softly, I don't know how much tears I've shed on this side of my arms. He cried until I was dumbfounded. I didn't expect a man to be so scary when he cried. Wasn't that so? She really cried until they were dumbfounded. They didn't know how to comfort her at all. A young lady throwing herself into their arms, cough, to express that she could still accept it, but a grown man grabbing their hands and crying at the top of his lungs. That scene, they couldn't help but shudder when they recalled it. Understand a little. After surviving a disaster, emotions are a little richer. After crying, everything will be fine, G3 said with a smile. His fatherly face made his comrades unable to bear to look at him directly. Xia Jinyuan, who had already let go of Yiqian and sat upright, waited for his comrades to finish speaking. He then said calmly, the two of you will take turns to be on guard. The rest of you will rest. There are still things to be done after this, so you have to rest well. Yes, they answered in unison. There was no need for Xia Jinyuan to make any arrangements. His comrades arranged their guards and quickly fell asleep with their guns in their arms. They did not arrange for Yiqian to be on guard. As long as there were enough people, the male soldiers would usually not arrange for Yiqian to be on guard. As for the female soldiers, they would definitely take care of them when they could. Yiqian was indeed tired. She did not refuse and prepared to lean against the wet and cold partition of the car to sleep. Comrade Xia Jinyuan patted her on the shoulder and said with a smile, rest here. Otherwise, I won't have anywhere to lean on. Chapter 4340. Before Yiqian could answer, a comrade with sharp ears answered. Captain, I can lend you my shoulder to lean on. Long Eagle said with a chuckle. It couldn't be helped since he had overheard it. You don't want to sleep? Why don't you stay on guard tonight? I'll sleep right away. Sorry to disturb you. A wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. Long Eagle immediately closed his eyes and fell asleep. G3, T6, and the others lowered their heads and laughed silently. As expected of their captain, he was amazing. The other comrade who did not know what was going on also laughed. It was not a laugh of knowing what was going on, but a laugh of mischief between men. The female soldier, Qing Miao, was the prettiest girl in their team. Q King had already said that he had to coax her first before coaxing her to join the team. She was only a year away from graduating from Qing Miao's military academy, so she just had to hurry up and report to the team when she graduated next year. It was raining. The car drove towards Cowell Town in the rainy night. The water ghosts of the Storm Commandos had already gone to bed early, but Demon King Li Jinyan slept much later than them. He called Xia Jinyuan on the comms many times but did not get a response. After knowing that they had all turned off their comms, he leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. As for when he would fall asleep, even Li Jinyan did not know. When Yiqian woke up, the car had already driven out of the rainforest. At this moment, she felt like she had fallen into a furnace. She was clearly drenched in the rain, but she did not feel cold at all. Her hands and feet were still warm. When she moved again, Yi Qian knew why. She had fallen asleep while resting her head on Captain Xia's shoulder, and now her entire body was in his arms. No wonder she slept so soundly. When she opened her eyes and woke up, the sky was already bright. With a slight movement, the man hugging her also woke up. Having just woken up, he always knew who he was hugging. With his eyes half closed, he kissed Yi Qian on the cheek and even said gently, "Good morning." The kiss and the good morning were seamlessly connected. Yi Qian did not even have the chance to react or reject him before he finished kissing her. The sky was already bright, and there were still comrades on alert. With this kiss, Yi Qian looked up at the alert position and saw G3's side profile and T6's sneaky smile. Although G3 was leaning sideways, he was also smiling. Needless to say, both of them had seen it. Fortunately, it wasn't a comrade who didn't know the truth who saw it. It was a comrade who knew about her relationship with Captain Xia. Yi Qian got up from his embrace. She straightened her body slightly before he pulled her back into his embrace. "It's still early. Let's sleep a little longer." Since he had just woken up, his husky voice was extremely sexy. Yi Qian blushed and felt her ears go numb, as if she had been electrocuted. At that moment, Yi Qian accepted her fate and let him hug her. Xia Jinyuan had always had a sense of propriety. Even though he was extremely reluctant, he still let go of Yi Qian. If he continued to hug him, all of his comrades, including the Chinese staff, would see them. The sky was already bright. The Special Forces soldiers who had woken up from their dreams were already awake the moment they opened their eyes. A few of the Chinese staff members who had woken up suggested that they wanted to get out of the car to take care of themselves. There were no problems nearby, so all 4 trucks stopped. Those who needed to be on alert stayed on alert, and those who needed to take care of their personal problems did so. After Xia Jinyuan finished taking care of himself, he came out and saw Yi Qian standing alone in the bushes that were half a person's height. She was looking to the east, and no one knew what she was thinking. The rain that had been falling since yesterday evening had stopped at some point. The bright blue sky was as clear as a mirror, and even the air was exceptionally fresh. It was so beautiful that one could stop and linger for a long time. Chapter 43-41. With such a clean sky, it was hard to tell that this land had been destroyed by war. Yi Qian looked at the sky and relaxed his eyebrows slightly, enjoying the hard-won peace in this war. "It's a sunny day today." Xia Jinyuan walked over and looked at the sky. Yi Qian heard footsteps and turned around. He smiled at him and said, "Yes, it's a sunny day. The sky is very beautiful. Just looking at it like this makes one's heart feel peaceful. The sky in Libya has always been beautiful, especially on sunny mornings. The sun will be out all day today. You can sit in the car for a day and dry your clothes." It could indeed dry the clothes. Xia Jinyuan didn't say much. It was too common for people to dry clothes, so it wasn't worth mentioning. Seeing that her camouflage uniform was a little messy, he naturally reached out to help Yi Qian tidy it up. The clothes had absorbed a little too much water, so he twisted them while he was at it. He then sighed and said, "Your equipment is so simple that I can't bear to say it. I'll talk to the Devil King later and ask him to apply to the higher-ups." Yi Qian tugged at his tactical vest. It was still a little heavy because of the water, but he couldn't take it off. She looked up slightly at the man who tidied her clothes. Her dark eyes reflected the blue sky like transparent glass, and only Xia Jinyuan's figure could be seen in the rippling water. He lowered his head, and she raised her head. Naturally, he could see the subtle changes in her eyes and face. Her sparkling eyes only contained his figure, as if they couldn't contain anything else. Xia Jinyuan, who didn't stop what he was doing, swayed fiercely. His heart felt like it was wrapped in honey. His thin lips curved slightly, and he resisted the urge to kiss her again. He tried very hard to turn his attention away. Now that they've started it, there will be more of this in the future. Your equipment is too simple. Yesterday, the Devil King told me that your equipment was only a Type 95 rifle. At that time, I thought that you all went to the mining area with the determination to die. At the mention of this, Xia Jinyuan's attention was diverted for a second, and his handsome face was already cold. Yi Qian had carried out a few missions overseas before, so compared to this battle with the Storm Commandos, his equipment was indeed much more complete. However, their mission this time was different, and they could only go light. Seeing that his expression was so tense that even his jaw had been bruised by him last night, he explained, "The mission we received this time required all of us to go light. We had to leave and turn back at the last minute to rescue the Chinese staff, so our equipment didn't keep up. However, you could talk to my big brother about it. You can't fall behind in terms of equipment. You have to have a complete set." She could also tell that the Storm Commandos' equipment was much worse than the Snowfield Brigade's. If Captain Xia said that the Water Ghosts would often go out on missions in the future, then their equipment would have to keep up. Yi Qian saw that his attire was a little messy, and his tactical vest was also crooked. Yi Qian spoke as he helped him tidy up. It was normal for comrades to dress neatly. Even if they were seen by others, they wouldn't think much of it. Yi Qian was very natural and neat, and Xia Jinyuan even tilted his neck slightly to make it easier for her to tidy up. The country's equipment is still a little simple, and everything is still in progress. Let's take it one step at a time. When the day comes that the entire army is equipped with top-notch equipment like the Snowfield Brigade's Special Forces, the country's strength and military strength will increase by many levels. Yi Qian, who was speaking, straightened his collar, adjusted his equipment, and patted his shoulder. Not bad, a very handsome male soldier. It was just that the bruise on his chin was a little annoying. Last night's collision had indeed hit his chin hard. Chapter 43-42. They didn't continue talking about the equipment. If they did, they would be going off topic. The two of them squeezed out some time to talk alone. These weren't problems that could be solved in a short period of time. It was fine if they didn't talk about it. In the end, Xia Jinyuan patted Yi Qian's head lightly and sighed. "Be good. In the future, you should fight with us. I really don't feel at ease letting you stay away from us. Last night, I wished I could just fly over on a plane and greet all the ancestors on my brother-in-law's side." Hearing this, Yi Qian's eyes curved into crescents. Brother-in-law's grandfather. Ahem, Captain Xia was very clear. He was all scoldingly family. After greeting them, I felt stupid. No matter how shabby the equipment is, we can't not go to the battlefield because of it. When we are needed, we have to be there. Otherwise, who will save them? I still believe in the fighting ability of the Water Ghosts. I also believe in the Devil's commanding ability. It's just that I was a little panicked at that time. I was afraid that something might happen. Yi Qian's nose twitched. He lowered his head and stroked the rifle that never left his side. His soft voice and the cool morning breeze drifted over. "We didn't think of going to die. Big Brother made a very careful battle plan. Although it was very dangerous, as long as we were careful, we would be able to come back alive. I didn't expect to suddenly receive a notice that you were coming over. They were so happy, but I was the only one who was dumbfounded. For some reason, I felt guilty as if I had been caught doing something bad." As she spoke, she pursed her lips and smiled. Because she was happy, her eyes were bright and beautiful like dewdrops on leaves. They were so sparkling that it made people feel tender and affectionate. Xia Jinyuan couldn't help but laugh. "You're right. I'm here to catch you. I just left a few days ago. What about you? You actually came to Libya to carry out a mission. You're even fighting across the military. But those guys in the water were so happy that they kept saying in front of me that you're a member of their team and a member of the Navy. I even wanted to stuff grass into their mouths. You're clearly my people. How did you become a member of their team?" She even played a little petty. She didn't say that they were from the team, but she said they were my people. How could Yi Qian not understand? She heard it and felt sweet in her heart. "What do you mean by your people and people in the team?" "I'm still a student in school." Yi Qian, who was feeling very sweet inside, also started to flaunt his eloquence. Even though he was clearly happy, he pretended to be nonchalant. Xia Jinyuan was so amused by her sweet expression that he covered his thin lips with his fist and laughed. Alas, why was his little fox so adorable? His smile was a little too wide, and it affected his chin that had been bruised by Yi Qian's helmet last night. In less than 3 seconds, his handsome face twitched in pain, and he couldn't even smile anymore. Don't laugh, don't laugh. It's all bruised. Yi Qian's heart ached. If it weren't for the fact that it was broad daylight and her comrades weren't far away, she would have tiptoed to blow on him. What's wrong? You want to blow it for me? The injury is too serious. Blowing won't work. You have to kiss it. Once isn't enough. 10 times is the only way for you to recover. She was very familiar with Captain Xia. He always had a bad taste in his mouth. She didn't blow on him, let alone kiss him. She glanced around and saw that the 10-minute break was over. Everyone gathered and got into the car. The Chinese peacekeeping camp in Cowltown had already been notified, and the Chinese mining companies had also heard the good news. They were all waiting in the camp. Chapter 43:43. When the 4 trucks drove into the camp, cheers and applause rang out. When the peacekeepers carried the injured Chinese leader out of the truck to arrange for surgery, the rest of the Chinese employees had already been hugged tightly in the arms of their compatriots who were waiting for them. Ding Gong needed emergency surgery. He only said, "I'm fine," and was immediately sent away. Whether or not he would be amputated was left to the doctor. The medical equipment in the camp was complete and could complete a large-scale surgery. The 12 Chinese employees all returned to their positions safely. When the news reached the country, everyone who was waiting for the news was finally relieved. Commander Dong of the Navy said to Major General Yang, "When they come back, I'll come to the military to apply for military funding. Our equipment must be properly matched. If they go into battle so lightly, I'll be the first to disagree." As the leader of the Storm Commandos, Demon King Li naturally thought of the problem that Xia Jinyuan had considered. Before the people returned to the country, they had to submit their opinions first. Soldiers had to do things quickly and decisively. How could they drag things out? Commander Dong, who was in the country, ordered his troops to go to the battlefield with light equipment. As he ordered, his heart bled. It was not easy for them to cultivate a naval special operations team. Every water demon was the hope of expanding the naval special operations team in the future. Sacrificing any one of them would be a huge loss. But what could they do? They were needed at that time, and only they, who were preparing to return to the country, could rescue the 12 hostages. Soldiers were trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. When they were needed to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy, they had to go even if they were barehanded. There was no way out. They went up, and now 1 or 2 of them returned safely. After the Navy commander finished speaking, he silently wiped the corners of his eyes with his hand. "They're all alive. They're all alive. Very good, really very good." Major General Yang could understand the Navy commander's feelings at this moment. Back then, when Xia Jinyuan took a few soldiers who had never been to the battlefield as their immediate superior, he did not sleep. He stayed in the office and did not go anywhere, waiting for them to call back. When everyone returned safely, all his energy was instantly drained, and he secretly wiped the corners of his eyes. "Old Dong, don't wipe your eyes. They're safe now. The camp in Yeni City is not very safe. We have to let them go again." "Let them go again? No way. I don't agree. You guys think of a way yourselves. Don't even think about sending my soldiers over." The Navy commander, who had just finished wiping the corners of his eyes, exploded. What a joke. The moment they stepped foot into the camp, they didn't even give them a chance to catch their breath and have a good rest. And now they're asking them to go out? He firmly disagreed. What's the point of not agreeing? It was useless. Commander Dong almost broke the phone when he hung up. What's the point of that? Carry it out. This time, they were going to provide support and not fight. The risk factor was much lower than the previous 2 missions. The Chinese peacekeeping camp was targeted by the illegal armed forces. If the illegal armed forces really took over the camp, they would lose a lot of face. The city's government forces could not hold on for much longer. The peacekeeping forces of several countries stationed in the city were retreating, and the Chinese peacekeeping camp was no exception. When the news of Clo Kissardin's assassination reached his brother's ears, the leader of the illegal Libyan militants was completely enraged. He gathered his forces to attack the capital of Libya and massacred the government forces in Yeni. Yeni city was about to fall, and the defeated government army could only abandon the city and leave. Chapter 43-44. The situation in Libya was getting more and more chaotic. Illegal militants attacked the capital of Libya, and NRPL militants also attacked the government forces. The Libyan government, which was under attack from both sides, turned to the United Nations for help. The weapons provided by a Western country to the illegal militants arrived at the port ahead of time, but they found that there was no way to contact a mine that was controlled yesterday. They even lost contact with the 6 experts and 4 mercenaries they sent out. The Western country's vice-ministerial leader in charge of this matter realized that there was a problem, but they had no way of knowing what the problem was. In order to prevent the surviving illegal militants from leaking the news, the Snowfield Brigade's special forces destroyed the communication and blew up the vehicles when they retreated. Even if the surviving guys wanted to leak the news, they had to walk out first. It took a long time to walk. How long would it take to walk more than 100 kilometers? By the time they walked out, everything was too late. Realizing that something was wrong, a Western country asked the illegal militants who cooperated with them to go and inquire about the situation. At the same time, 2 special forces of the Chinese Special Forces were ordered to go and meet the Chinese peacekeepers who retreated from the city of Yeni. With the help of the Russian side, the Chinese peacekeepers in Yeni once again repelled the siege of the illegal militants. The British and Russian peacekeepers withdrew, and the Chinese side immediately began to retreat after the fighting ended. The Russian peacekeepers sent over did not leave. They also needed to withdraw to the town of Cowell, so naturally, they would follow the Chinese side. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu first arranged for the wounded to get on the vehicles, and then arranged for the transportation of supplies. The soldiers in front opened the way, the middle was for cover, and the rear was for retreat. They completed the retreat as quickly as possible. A total of 31 special forces from the Snowfield Brigade and the Storm Commandos, including the 2 captains, entered the camp. They only had time to change into camouflage uniforms and grab a few buns in their hands. They did not even have half an hour to rest before jumping on the vehicles to carry out the mission. This time, they all went to meet them as peacekeepers. After getting on the vehicles, they arranged for their guards and seized the time to rest. Yi Qian could not be in the same vehicle as Xia Jinyuan on this trip. She was currently fighting with the water ghosts of the Storm Commandos and could not leave the team at will. Even though Xia Jinyuan wanted to be in the same vehicle, he had no choice. Right now, he was not the captain of the Qing dynasty. His brother-in-law, Demon King Li, was the captain of the Qing dynasty. After personally sending Yi Qian to the truck, he was afraid that Yi Qian would not be able to get on the truck alone, so he decided to jump in first. Then, he reached out to pull Yi Qian up. After pulling him down, he was not in a hurry to let go. He said to the water ghosts sitting in the truck, "Brothers, please take care of my team's Qing Yao." What should he do? He really wanted to kick this guy who had a fake smile and was obviously up to no good out of the car. They then looked at the Demon King who had yet to board the car and was standing below. Seeing that his face was as cold as ice, even his eyes seemed to be frozen, the water ghosts pointed outside the car, indicating for this thick-skinned brother who had climbed up to communicate with their captain and not to stand here and be an eyesore. Li Jinyan, who had yet to board the truck, looked coldly at the arrogant guy who had climbed up to their truck like a host. He cleared his throat and said calmly, "You're trying to stall for time, right?" His brother-in-law's voice came from behind. Xia Jinyuan smiled and turned his head to take a look. Then, he said to Yi Qian, who could not do anything to him, "You're a soldier I've trained. Once you're in the brothers' company, don't embarrass me as the captain, understand?" Understood. Yi Qian was very cooperative and nodded solemnly. Chapter 43-45. How could she not cooperate? Based on her understanding of him, if she didn't cooperate now, she would be the one having a headache. To avoid trouble, she might as well cooperate with him. Moreover, he had indeed brought her up single-handedly. With Yi Qian's cooperation, Xia Jinyuan felt comfortable all over as he jumped out of the car. His movements were clean and swift, and he looked so handsome that Yi Qian's eyes were filled with smiles. Seeing this, Li Jinyin didn't want to say anything more. He glanced at the guys who were still standing there and jumped into the car. He pulled up the tailgate and pulled Yi Qian to his side at the same time. Xia Jinyuan waved his hand and left in satisfaction. You want to steal Qing Yao? You're thinking too much. When Z7 saw him walking over, he immediately retracted half of his body and sat up straight. He waited for his captain, who looked like a peacock spreading its tail, to come over as soon as he arrived in front of Qing Yao. When they got into the car, Z7's voice was just loud enough for his comrades to hear. Brothers, we have to be careful. The brother next door is really thinking about our team's Qing Yao. Don't provoke Qing Yao. If she really goes to the storm team in a fit of anger, then we won't even have a place to cry. Qing Yao was still a military academy student. Even if she was in the army, it wasn't impossible for her to cross the military, especially an outstanding female soldier like her. Who wouldn't want her? I'm not trying to scare you. Brothers, we have to be 120% vigilant. Z7 secretly glanced at Lieutenant Colonel Xia, who was sitting in the middle, and said this. When he glanced over, Xia Jinyuan knew that he was making fun of him. He glanced at Z7 coldly, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Z7 instantly panicked. His strong desire to live made him speak up immediately. In front of all his comrades, he made a big turn. But don't worry too much. We still have our captain. With our captain, Qing Yao can't run anywhere. Don't you guys agree? He then turned to Xia Jinyuan and said, Q King, I was right, wasn't I? With you around, Qing Yao is a member of our team. Raising his hand, Xia Jinyuan patted Z7's dog head and said with a smile, You're so sensible. Next time, don't say such things that shake the morale of our troops. Since it's your first offense, you'll have to run 20 kilometers with weights when you get back. Let's put on the tab first and return it when we return home. Z7 was speechless. She had wanted to see him make a fool of himself. But in the end, before he even returned to the country, he was already holding a grudge. The comrades who always liked to watch a good show criticized the captain's punishment for being unfair. It had shaken the morale of the troops. How could 20 kilometers be enough? It should be at least 30 kilometers. Xia Jinyuan, who had always been democratic, sincerely accepted the criticism from his comrades in order to prove that he was a fair and impartial captain. With a wave of his hand, he changed the load from 20 kilometers to 30 kilometers. Z7 angrily protested. What kind of comrades were they? He wanted to change teams. His protest was invalid, but 30 kilometers with weight was valid. With Z7's help, the atmosphere in the car was very relaxed. The water ghosts were also very relaxed. They praised their own team like flowers and even praised their benefits to a higher level so that Yi Qian would be tempted to join their team. Li Jinyin just watched without saying anything and let the water ghosts persuade him. It was not bad to join their team. In the future, he could take care of his sister more. When the water ghosts saw that their captain was letting them persuade him, it was obvious that he also wanted Qing Yao to stay. Hence, they persuaded him even more happily. Yi Qian did not move. He smiled and listened quietly. Occasionally, he would nod to show that he was listening. After 20 minutes, the thirsty water ghosts stopped talking. Yi Qian continued to smile. After a round of persuasion, Yi Qian was still very calm and unmoved. Hence, from then on, the water ghosts of the Storm Commandos did not mention this matter again. This was because they all knew that it was absolutely impossible for Qing Yao to join their team. Chapter 43-46. The evacuation of the Chinese peacekeeping camp in Jenny went smoothly. The illegal militants gathered all their forces to fight with the government forces, vowing to take down Jenny. They also posted a video online, saying that they would rule the land and expel all those who opposed them and defied them from Libya. Finally, they recorded a video of the illegal militants brutally killing the government forces. The bloody scene immediately drew strong condemnation from various countries. Soon, the Libyan president also recorded a video responding to the illegal militants with an extremely strong and resolute attitude. He also told the various countries that the government forces had killed the leader of the illegal militants, Kukalo Caesardin, and released a set of photos. The photos were provided by the Chinese Snowfield Brigade. Kukalo Caesardin was one of the leaders of the illegal militants. His death instantly caused a huge uproar, encouraging the Libyan government forces. Their morale was greatly boosted, and the Libyans saw new hope. When the video released by the president was released, a certain Western country that had been providing weapons to the illegal militants held a secret meeting. The details of the meeting were unknown, but the weapons that were supposed to be provided a week later were quietly withdrawn from the port. Clearly, the country had the intention to end the cooperation. Kukalo Caesardin was killed by the Libyan government forces? How was that possible? Kukalo Caesardin wasn't killed by the Libyan government forces. Instead, a country secretly sent troops to solve a problem for the Libyan government. Which country was it? News came from the port of SAS that none of their probes had found out who had sneaked into the bilge and killed their great leader. There was not a single clue left at the scene that could be found. Even the bullets were made by NATO, so there was no way to investigate. They avoided the probes, the hidden sentries, and successfully opened the 4 password-lock heavy doors that led to the bottom of the ship. They also successfully avoided another set of probes that were installed in the dark. Even the alarm system did not work at all. No one knew when they had snuck into port SAS, and no one discovered how they had snuck into the abandoned ship. No one knew how they had cracked the passcode and successfully assassinated so many guards. It had become an undecipherable mystery. Because of this, the Western country immediately realized that something was wrong. They stopped the arms supply and quickly erased the transaction records. When they learned that Kukalo Caesardin had been assassinated, they only temporarily stopped the arms supply. When they learned that the situation in the mining area wasn't good and that they had completely lost contact, they immediately cut off all contact with the illegal militants, wiping out all dealings with them without leaving any trace. At the same time, another secret meeting was held to try and find out which country had helped Libya. The Chinese side was undoubtedly the biggest suspect, and there was a heated discussion about whether the Chinese side had the strength or not. In a meeting room in a heavily guarded building, there were about 10 people sitting in metal leather chairs with solemn expressions. They had already quarreled with each other, and their expressions were solemn, making the atmosphere of the meeting extremely depressing. Someone pointed out that it was impossible because it was impossible for the Chinese side to send peacekeepers to assassinate Kukalo Caesar. There were also people who suspected that the Chinese side had secretly sent reinforcements. They were also rebutted. The reason for the rebuttal was very simple. So far, they had not found a force strong enough to complete an assassination without leaving any traces. Chapter 43-47. The heated discussion was fruitless until the Chinese peacekeepers successfully rescued the mine workers who had been held hostage by the illegal militants. The argument finally came to a conclusion. The Chinese didn't participate in the assassination of Kukalo Caesardin. Their focus was on rescuing the 12 Chinese workers who had been held hostage. The topic of "does the Chinese have a strength?" came to an end. Of course, they didn't have a strength. How could they save the Chinese workers and assassinate Kukalo Caesardin? So which country was it? Russia became the biggest suspect, and Russia had enough strength to do it. As for whether Russia had found out which country was supplying weapons to the illegal militants in Libya, so what if they found out? Where's the evidence? There was no evidence. Even if they found out, it was just a discovery. The illegal militants who were fighting with the Libyan government forces didn't know that their arms supply had been cut off. The first leader once again said that he would drive the president out of Libya within a month. He also said to Russia that they would make Russia pay a heavy price. There are not many countries that believe this. Provoking the fighting nation and making the fighting nation pay a painful price, he really didn't know where he got his confidence from. One moment, he declared war on this country, and the next moment, he declared war on another country. The special forces who hadn't received the Chinese peacekeepers in Yini didn't know what was happening internationally. Yi Qian, who was resting with her eyes closed, stretched her sore legs. As the car swayed, she couldn't help but yawn a few times. Yi Qian gave up resisting and let herself have a good sleep. She closed her eyes and turned off the headset. It would be embarrassing if all her comrades heard her talking in her sleep. She only turned off the call and didn't cut off the entire communication channel. She could still hear what was said on the channel. Li Jinyan, who also had his eyes closed, felt a weight on his shoulder. He turned his head and saw that his sister had already closed her eyes and fallen asleep. A smile flashed across his eyes as he adjusted his sitting position slightly so that Yi Qian could rest more comfortably on him. The two sides kept in contact and finally met after more than an hour of driving. As soon as the car stopped, Yi Qian, who had fallen asleep, opened her eyes. A familiar voice came through the headset, telling everyone to get out of the car and gather. Xia Jinyuan said as he jumped out of the front passenger seat. They would wait here for the peacekeeping vehicles to arrive. The comrades in the car got off one by one and lined up neatly to wait for the peacekeeping camp vehicles to arrive. About 4 minutes later, they heard the rumbling sound of vehicles coming from the front. Then the first Jeep came out first, followed by the second truck. There were a total of 16 vehicles in the peacekeeping camp. There were 4 Jeeps, 3 transport vehicles, 2 ambulances, and the rest were trucks. As they drove over, the special forces who had been in formation for 4 minutes immediately jumped back into the vehicles. The first vehicle became the vehicle of the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces. They led the way to the camp, while the Storm Commando's vehicle was the last vehicle. They were responsible for all the security at the rear. The meeting did not take a minute, and they returned to Cowell Town as quickly as possible. When Commander Dong learned that the meeting went smoothly and there were no twists and turns along the way, he finally felt relieved. He said to Major General Yang, "I can eat one more bowl for dinner tonight." Major General Yang couldn't stop laughing and said, "Be careful. Don't blow your stomach." Commander Dong replied, "I'm willing to blow my stomach as long as my soldiers can return safely." Chapter 43-48. It was noon when they arrived at Corval Town. The 2 teams of special forces who had completed their mission could finally have a good rest. Xia Jinyuan got out of the car and looked around. He then looked back at the convoy that was still slowly driving into the camp. His cold black eyes narrowed slightly as he said to V8, "I'm going to take a nap in front. If it's a small matter, look for G3. If it's a big matter, look for the Devil King. If it's an emergency, look for me on the channel. Remember, don't come looking for me. I'm very tired now. I need a good sleep." For the sake of proof, he was really tired and yawned several times in just one sentence. The T6 combatant nodded in a daze and answered, "Yes." When he came back to his senses, his team had already strode toward the few large trees in front that were most suitable for cooling off. "Are you really that tired? In the past, I could still jump around after fighting for 3 days and 3 nights without sleeping. Why are you so tired today? Could it be that you're old and don't have enough energy?" The T6 combatant muttered softly as he stared at the departing figures. Lieutenant Colonel Xia, who had walked far away, did not hear him. He was contacting Yi Qian alone. He did not look tired at all and was full of energy. "We have 8 hours to rest. You must be tired. I found a good place. After you get out of the car, get rid of Big Brother and come straight to me." Yi Qian, who was sitting in the last truck, suddenly heard a man's gentle voice in her earpiece. She secretly glanced at her big brother sitting next to her, but did not dare to say anything. She only lowered her voice and grunted a few times to show that she already knew and that it was not convenient for her to speak at the moment. Xia Jinyuan was amused when he heard that and did not dare to say anything. It seemed like he was sitting with his brother-in-law. "Get rid of Big Brother. Don't let him know. Get out of the car and come over." He suppressed his laughter and continued, "Let Big Brother know that he's going to do something ruthless like breaking up an affectionate couple again. When I see Big Brother, I'm even more afraid than when I see my father-in-law." "It's settled then. After you come in, you'll see 3 large trees lined up side by side behind the tent. I'll take that place first, so it's easy to find. If you really can't find me, I'll come and pick you up." What could Yi Qian say? She couldn't say anything. She couldn't even say a word or two. She was afraid that her big brother would sense it. Li Jinyan really did not expect Xia Jinyuan to play tricks under his nose again. He remembered that there were still 8 hours of rest after entering the barracks, so he had to arrange for his sister to find a bed in the infirmary to rest for a while. He then said, "Wait for me when you get out of the car. I'll take you to the medics to rest. Don't squeeze with us." Yi Qian, who knew that something would happen later, was so guilty that she almost choked on her own saliva. She almost thought that her brother had really hurt her. Yi Qian cleared his throat. He was really not suited to do bad things. He smiled and said, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. I'm covered in dust. I don't want to dirty their beds. I'll find a place to rest. You don't have to make any special arrangements." After saying that in one breath, he took a deep breath and tried his best to make himself look calm. She didn't know that Li Jinyan's brows were slightly furrowed. In the end, he didn't say anything and nodded slightly. "That's fine too. Don't turn off the communicator. I need to make sure that I can find you at any time." "Okay, I understand." Yi Qian smiled and nodded. That was close. They finally got through this. Xia Jinyuan had already walked under the shade of the tree. Yi Qian's truck had just driven into the barracks. Fang Zhongxiang, who was stationed in the barracks in Cowell Town, was talking to Lieutenant Colonel Zhu. They had agreed to meet Captain Li later. As for Xia Jinyuan, they didn't know about his existence. They also didn't know that there were actually 2 special forces teams in the team. The 2 people in charge of the barracks both thought that there was only one special forces team. Chapter 43-49. It was precisely because Lieutenant Colonel Zhu and Lieutenant Colonel Fang did not know of the existence of another special force that Xia Jinyuan said to look for Li Jinyan and not to disturb him. The special forces of the Snowfield Brigade were now a shadow that no one knew about. Li Jinyan got out of the car and met with the lieutenant colonels of the 2 camps. After a few words, they went back to work. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu waited until Li Jinyan came out of the tent before he said to Lieutenant Colonel Fang, who was stationed in the Cowell camp, with lingering fear, "Fortunately, we met them. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for our 2 camps to rescue the 12 employees in time. When I learned that the 12 Chinese employees had fallen into the hands of the illegal militants, I was thinking about where to send people to rescue them." Speaking of the kidnapping of the Chinese employees, Lieutenant Colonel Zhu's heart was still beating fast. "I was really worried at the time. Fortunately, they came to solve the problem and rescued everyone." Lieutenant Colonel Fang nodded. "Indeed, the situation in Libya is too chaotic now. We can't let anything happen here." Lieutenant Colonel Nikita from Russia called. "Next, both camps will be on guard together until the illegal militants retreat. What are you going to do with those Russian peacekeepers? Drive them back to the Russian camp or continue to stay here? Take a short rest and return to the Russian camp. No need to send a separate car. They have their own. By the way, are there any ready-made steam buns in the cafeteria? Bring 50 of them back." Lieutenant Colonel Fang laughed. 2 bags of steam buns as a thank you gift? A specified thank you gift. I like steam buns." Lieutenant Colonel Zhu also laughed. As all the problems were solved, the smile on his face increased a lot. Each person can eat 3 steam buns in one sitting. 50 steam buns are enough for them to eat 2 meals. This thank you gift is quite unique. We don't have any ready-made ones. Let the cookhouse take care of it. Okay, I'll go see the wounded first. Lieutenant Colonel Fang also got up. "Let's go and see. The supplies will be arranged by your side. Your soldiers also need to be on guard. After resting and reorganizing, we'll have a big assembly. Everything that needs to be arranged must be arranged. The situation is still uncertain. Cowell Town hasn't been affected by the war yet, but it's hard to say what will happen next." Lieutenant Colonel Fang said as he walked out of the tent with Lieutenant Colonel Zhu. As the people in charge of the camp, they didn't have much time to rest. Everything had to be arranged properly. They did not care about the special forces soldiers who had entered the barracks to rest. The military called and told them that all matters of the Special Forces would be handled by their respective team leaders. They would leave the barracks in 8 hours and return home. The Special Forces soldiers who had been fighting continuously got out of the car and didn't even have lunch. One by one, they crawled into their tents and found a random spot to lie down on the ground with their guns. In less than 3 minutes, all of them were sleeping soundly. Yi Qian did not enter the tent to sleep. Instead, he walked around the tent and headed towards the 3 trees that Xia Jinyuan had pointed out. Before she got close, she saw Xia Jinyuan talking to a tall and bulky man from afar. Judging from his attire, she could tell that he was a foreign soldier. The foreign soldier was none other than Luke, who had been with Xia Jinyuan for a year and a half. Luke, who had come from the signal flag to help the Chinese peacekeepers defeat the illegal militants in the barracks this morning, looked as if he had seen a ghost. His light brown eyes were so wide that they were about to fall out of their sockets. Xia, he wasn't mistaken. The Chinese peacekeeper in front of him was Xia. Chapter 4350. Xia Jinyuan looked at Luke, whose eyes were about to fall out of their sockets. He wanted to look away, silently, and pretend that he didn't know him. But that was impossible. This guy obviously recognized him, which was why he looked like he had seen a ghost. Looking at the blue helmet next to the peacekeeping soldier, Xia Jinyuan felt that there was no need to pretend that he didn't know Luke. His former partner was so shocked that he stood still and didn't say anything. Xia Jinyuan took the initiative to take a step forward and smile calmly. Long time no see, Luke. Luke's eyes widened several times. He knew that he didn't recognize the wrong person. He knew that this was the guy he had been looking for half a month. Xia, the sun is a little bright. We can sit under the shade and chat. Xia Jinyuan approached and took the initiative to invite his old friend to have a heart-to-heart talk. His eyebrows were bright, and he didn't look guilty at all. Luke clenched his teeth. Yes, they needed to have a good chat about how he became a member of the Chinese peacekeeping soldiers. Luke took large strides and stomped heavily on the sparse grass and yellow mud. After an entire night of rain, he left behind a size 44 thigh print wherever he went. Some of the deep teeth of his boots were clearly visible. There was a rainproof cloth under the shade of the tree. Luke, who was biting his cheeks, felt depressed. He deliberately bumped his shoulder into Xia Jinyuan's shoulder as he walked over, and he did so with a clear conscience. This hypocritical guy, in order to find him and confirm whether he was still alive, he almost died in the hotel. Look, he can still laugh. Fuck, he really wanted to fight now and beat up this guy who could still laugh. Luke angrily walked to the shade of the tree and sat down on the moisture-proof mattress. He stared at the guy who wasn't in a hurry and even strolled to the side as if he was admiring the scenery. Luke's fists were itching, and he really wanted to punch him. Xia Jinyuan really didn't expect to meet an old friend in the Chinese peacekeeping camp. He knew that the Russian side had sent peacekeeping soldiers to support the Chinese camp, but he didn't know that the soldiers sent by the Russian side were the special forces in the signal flag. And one of them was an acquaintance of his. He actually bumped into Luke in Libya, and he didn't even have time to dodge. You were a Chinese soldier. Luke spoke in a cold voice, without the playful smile he had in Malabon. You were the one who shot Cobra. You came to kill Cobra. His tone was firm. Was there a need to doubt it? There was no need. His clothes and identity were enough to prove everything. Luke was a special forces soldier from the signal flag. Even though he was sitting and looking up, his murderous aura was still strong. He stared at Xia Jinyuan. His light brown eyes were cold. Even the sun above his head couldn't melt them. Facing the aggressive Luke, Xia Jinyuan walked over with a smile. I've reminded you countless times that I'm not as loyal to Cobra as you've seen, but you didn't believe me. Hey, buddy, do you think I would have told you everything about Cobra's trip to the hotel? I'll answer whatever you ask me. Do you think that the reason I'm so cooperative is because we have a good relationship? Chapter 4351. Luke knew how dark and smelly his face was right now. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Why was I secretly happy? Now that I think about it, I was really stupid. Xia Jinyuan sighed the whole time. He did not forget to make a gesture to Yi Jian to wait. I thought you would be suspicious, but I really didn't expect that. You actually thought that I revealed Cobra's whereabouts to you, just because we are good partners. With every sentence he said, Luke's face darkened. By the time he finished, Luke's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. So, are you saying I'm stupid? Luke thought to himself and slowly clenched his fists. This guy was right. With his cautious personality, how could he have answered all my questions? Since he was loyal to Cobra, he would definitely keep Cobra's itinerary a secret. Even if I were his partner, he wouldn't have revealed anything. Back then, how could I have been so stupid to think that everything was because we were good friends? Deep in his heart, Luke felt that he was extraordinarily stupid back then. Also, you speak the truth when you're drunk. At the time, I also said that you said a few words that I didn't understand. Unfortunately, you didn't think of it back then. You obviously only know one language. After you were drunk, you said a few words that I didn't understand. With my loyalty to Cobra, why didn't I tell Cobra? That's because I intentionally hid it for you. Why would I intentionally hide it for you? That's because you and I have the same goal. There's no need to kill each other. Xia Jinyuan continued to speak. Luke's face darkened, and the corner of his mouth kept twitching. Xia Jinyuan patted his shoulder from time to time. Luke felt that he had lost all his face and couldn't even maintain his composure. Luke glared at the hand on his shoulder. His face was so dark that it was almost expressionless. He gritted his teeth and said, I hate it when people pat my shoulder. You used to like to pat my shoulder. Xia Jinyuan retracted his hand and said with a smile, I was just learning from you. Luke's eyes widened as his chest heaved up and down. Is this guy in front of me, who laughs like a street gangster, still the Xia I know? They didn't look alike at all. In the past, Xia was cold and serious. He was always teased by himself for being a man who was not even interested in women. As for the Xia in front of him, the words he said made him very angry. Even his smile made him want to beat him up. You'll know who I am when we go to Burma, right? You can understand Russian, right? Therefore, you've always known my identity, but I've never known yours. Luke held his breath. He felt that he was as stupid as a donkey. Smart, you got everything right. It's a pity that I don't have any wine. Otherwise, I would really like to have a drink to celebrate. Thank you for your compliment, but I don't want to celebrate with you. I just want to beat you up. Luke waved his fist and gritted his teeth so hard that they were about to shatter. You know everything, but I don't. In the end, I almost died in the hotel trying to find you. You hypocrite. You cheated me of my feelings. Luke gritted his teeth and growled the last sentence. Yi Qian, who was slowly walking over, happened to hear him. Just as he was about to hear, You hypocrite. You cheated my feelings. He stumbled and almost sprained his ankle. Captain Xia cheated a man's feelings? How'd he cheat? Yi Qian, who was quite interested, decided to listen first and not disturb him for the time being. Chapter 43:52. He had no choice. Admitting his own stupidity required a certain amount of courage. Luke, on the other hand, did not have the courage. He could only piss himself off. Let him piss himself off for a while. He had to accept reality. Luke, who had pissed himself off, stopped talking. In the end, he closed his eyes and laid down on the mattress, ignoring Xia Jinyuan. He wanted to catch his breath first. Xia Jinyuan would not go out of his way to comfort him. The only person who could make him explain again and again was Yi Qian. As for Luke, he had said everything he needed to say. He had also given Luke enough hints back then, but Luke did not realize it himself. When he pulled in the net, he was a little anxious. He only wanted to return to his homeland that he had left for 6 years as soon as possible. He did not care about the details. If he had not secretly helped to erase some traces, with Cobra's vigilance, she might have suspected Luke. Yi Qian was still waiting to hear how her Captain Xia had cheated a man's feelings, but the man was still lying on the mattress, silent for a long time. As Lieutenant Colonel Xia smiled, he suddenly felt that something was not quite right. His girlfriend was standing not far away. Then, there was a man gnashing his teeth at him, full of emotions. He used all his strength to say, You cheated my feelings. Lieutenant Colonel Xia slowly raised his eyes, then slowly looked at his girlfriend. Yi Jian had been waiting for this moment. Seeing that he was about to move, her charming face had already turned cold. Even her eyes that were as black as obsidian were suffused with a cold light. When the sunlight shone, the cold piercing pierced Lieutenant Colonel Xia, causing him to violently shudder. Captain Xia could not care less about the big man in front of him. He immediately turned on his headset and explained with a hint of urgency, "Little fox, don't listen to his nonsense. I have no other relationship with him. We worked together before. You know Cobra, right? I hurt myself to gain Cobra's trust in Myanmar. After you left, it was this nonsense guy who saved me. It was a misunderstanding. He and Luke did not have any relationship beyond friendship. He couldn't ask Yi Qian to come over, and there was no way he could get rid of Luke in such a short time. He didn't pay any attention to the big man lying motionless on the ground. He could only hurry up and deal with him so that he could clear his name. It's him. He thought I was dead. He didn't expect to see me here. He's angry at himself for his stupidity, so I need to spend some time on him. You should find a place to rest first. I'll come to you after I send him away." He had to explain it clearly. He didn't want to be accused of cheating a man's feelings for no reason. Yi Qian, who was laughing in his heart, did not show it on his face. In the past, it was always him who teased her. This time, it was her turn to return the favor. Politeness demands reciprocity, so just accept it. An explanation is a cover-up. It seems that Captain Xia still has many personal secrets that I don't know. Well, I'll wait for Captain Xia to come to me. Yi Qian said calmly, so calmly that Xia Jinyuan could not tell if she was really angry or just faking it. I'll leave first. You take care of your own matters. Although she wanted to tease him, she was still worried about whether it would be a problem to suddenly meet someone she knew. Before she turned to leave, Yi Qian couldn't help but express her concern. With her words of concern, the smart Xia Jinyuan instantly breathed a sigh of relief. "No problem. We're all spies. It's okay if you let me handle it. Be good. I'll explain it to you in detail later. Go get some rest. Don't stand under the sun." Hearing his nervousness, Yi Qian was already laughing in his heart. "Ha, Captain Xia, you finally have a day like this." Chapter 43:53. After Yi Qian left, she had to find a place to rest. Her stomach was slightly uncomfortable. It was almost time for her to bleed once a month. Fortunately, her body was strong. Other than the slight discomfort she felt before coming, there were no other reactions. After watching Yi Qian leave, Xia Jinyuan sat down cross-legged and said to Luke, who still had his eyes closed, "Although Cobra is dead, his power has not been disbanded. I know that the Signal Flag Corps is still active. You have been with Cobra for 6 years. It's best if you don't enter Melabon to avoid being recognized. I'm the same as you. We're both soldiers who are trying to get rid of Cobra. You have your duties, and I have mine. We're both loyal to our own countries. Even if I know something, I can't ask you for confirmation. If I were to tell you directly that I know you are a soldier in Melabon, would you choose to work with me? Or would you kill me with a gun? You would choose the latter. I didn't come here to be killed by you with a gun. I need to do my job well." As a soldier, Luke actually understood this. It was just that he couldn't accept it for a while. He actually didn't discover anything. During the week when he didn't discover anything, Xiao must have crossed his arms and secretly laughed at him. "Shit." Luke cursed under his breath and finally opened his eyes again. "You hid so well. I really didn't find anything wrong with you. Xia, your disguise successfully deceived everyone." "Your disguise also successfully deceived everyone," Xia Jinyuan replied with a smile. Luke glared. "But I didn't deceive you. That's because you drank too much while hugging a beauty. I advise you to drink less alcohol that would embarrass yourself. Unfortunately, you didn't listen." "Shit." Luke was not good at cursing. He kept repeating the same sentence. His fist hit the moisture-proof mat, leaving a fist print that slowly disappeared. Luke wiped his face and stared at Xia Jinyuan. "How did you leave the hotel? Blend in with the hotel guests and leave by car." Xia Jinyuan did not mention that he left in the car of the Chinese ambassador in Melbourne, Qin Xiu, and there was no need to drag Qin Xiu into this. The sun was scorching hot, but there was a gentle breeze blowing. Sitting under the shade of a tree, The cool breeze blew gently, but it didn't feel hot. A leaf quietly fell, gently landing on Luke's shoulder. Xia Jinyuan brushed the fallen leaves away and said sincerely, "Luke, thank you for your help. I apologize for hiding the truth from you. If I had to choose again, I'm sorry, but as a Chinese soldier, I would still choose to hide it from you. I think you can understand." The fallen leaves twirled between his fingers. His slender fingers were somewhat thin, but they were filled with strength. Luke stared intently as the scene of Cobra collapsing at the hotel flashed through his mind. It was this pair of hands that killed Cobra with one shot. He fired without hesitation, not giving Cobra a way out. "You don't want us to take Cobra back to Russia, do you?" Luke asked. "Of course, he's a very dangerous guy. As long as he is alive, everything is unpredictable. Only death is the real end." Luke narrowed his eyes and asked, "You know that we want to take him back to Russia, right?" Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows and replied indifferently, "I just want to kill him. That way, I can return to China as soon as possible." As for whether he knew about the Russian plan, was it important? It was not important. Chapter 4354. Luke looked at his former partner and did not speak for a long time. Xiao was right. His mission was to kill Cobra. As a soldier, he was just carrying out his mission. As long as his mission was completed, what did other people and other countries' plans have to do with him? It had nothing to do with him. Xiao was loyal to his own country. Other people and other countries had nothing to do with him. He knew that Russia wanted to bring back Cobra, but so what? The decision of the Russian side did not affect him, nor could it sway him. Furthermore, his anger was not because Xia had killed Cobra. His anger was all because, what the hell? He had actually been fooled by him and had never doubted his identity. His IQ was humiliated. Therefore, he was furious. Luke's anger gradually disappeared. He finally accepted the fact that his IQ was crushed and he was inferior to others. He had lost face. No matter how angry he was, he had to accept reality. Damn it. He wanted to smoke a cigarette and drink a glass of whiskey. He could accept reality while blowing out smoke rings. But to accept reality like this, he had to regain some face. Luke stared at his former partner who had made him lose face and revealed a fake, hypocritical smile. "You're impotent, frigid, and don't like women. You actually like men, don't you? My girlfriend is very outstanding. Do you think I'm impotence and apathy?" Xia Jinyuan saw through his plan and answered with a smile. It made Luke feel as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat. He struggled until his throat hurt, chest hurt, and lungs hurt. He thought that he needed to end this unpleasant conversation. Luke changed the topic and said, "Cobra is dead, but it's not over. We received the latest information that a very young man has begun to contact a senior Burmese military officer. Xia, our mission is not completely over. It's still ongoing. Maybe one day, we will work together again. I look forward to working with you again. I believe we will have a chance to contact each other again." Cobra was backed by country. When Cobra died, the country behind her cultivated a new successor. Xia Jinyuan did not find it strange. It was normal. Spy warfare had always existed. "I'm also looking forward to working with you next time. Aren't you going to thank me for the information? Does your country know that someone has started to interact with Burmese military officers? People who appear on the blacklist will always pay more attention to their movements." Xia Jinyuan smiled casually, as if he had already known. Luke took a deep breath and looked Xia Jinyuan up and down seriously. After going back and forth a few times, Luke finally asked the question that had been bothering him. "Xia, you are very different from the you in Melbourne. Which one is the real you?" Melbourne Xia was silent and cold. He liked to be alone and did not like to talk. He did not like to get too close to others and was very violent. Every time he opened fire, he was the fiercest and killed the most people. Most importantly, she was the one who made fun of him until he ran away every time. And now, Xia's words made him very angry. He was not silent, nor was he cold. He seemed to like smiling, and when he smiled, he really looked like a bastard. Most importantly, it was now her turn to be the one who wanted to run away from him. After asking the biggest question in his heart, Luke felt that his breathing had become much smoother. It was really too uncomfortable to hold it in. Chapter 43:55. Hearing this, Xiao Jinyuan raised his slender eyebrows. The smile on his face, which was covered with oil paint, deepened. One is me when I'm on a mission, and the other is me when I'm relaxed. They are both the real me. There's no difference. You are a very cunning fellow. Luke gritted his teeth again when he got the same answer as if he didn't get one, but there was nothing he could do, because no matter how cunning this guy was, he couldn't hate him. It was getting late, and Luke, who had to return to the Russian camp, stood up. Although he was gritting his teeth, there was a smile in his eyes. If I have the chance, I will definitely get you drunk. Cunning guy. How could I be friends with a cunning guy? Goodbye. Luke was still the same old Luke. Although his identity and position had changed, it did not affect his friendship with Xiao Jinyuan. Even if they had different goals at the time, they had been together for more than a year and a half, and had gone through fire and water together, so they had already accumulated a deep friendship. However, their identities were different, and there was a limit to how deep their friendship could be. Xiao Jinyuan stood up to see Luke and his comrades off. The 10 people sent by the Russians were not all special forces. Only 3 of them were special forces, and the rest were real peacekeepers. On the other hand, Luke and the others did not discover that there were 2 teams of Chinese special forces hidden in the Chinese camp. The real peacekeepers were disguised as Chinese mine workers. There were as many special forces as there were real peacekeepers disguised as mine workers. Luke had only stayed in the Chinese camp for less than an hour, so it was very difficult to discover him. After seeing Luke off, Xiao Jinyuan immediately went to find Yi Qian. He still had to deal with him properly, but he found that. He could not contact Yi Qian. When he asked his comrades, they did not know where Yi Qian had gone. Xiao Jinyuan found his brother-in-law, but unfortunately, his brother-in-law did not tell him where Yi Qian was resting. He even dragged him to work. There was news from military that because of the problem in Jinni City, transport planes could not directly enter the town of Jinni City. The special forces returning to China had to drive to Kiki Prefecture, where planes were allowed to fly. Kiki Prefecture was more than 200 kilometers away from Jinni City. How to safely evacuate was another big problem. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu looked at Kiki Prefecture on the map and said to Li Jinyan, 226 kilometers. In the middle, we have to pass through 3 crossfire points between the government forces and the illegal militants. We can provide support with a truck, but we really can't provide any more support for the militants. Cowell Town, which was closest to Jinni City, could end up like Jinni City at any time. Furthermore, the Chinese side had been ambushed twice by the illegal militants. Lieutenant Colonel Zhu and Lieutenant Colonel Fong were worried that there would be another exchange of fire, so they had to ensure that the peacekeepers in the camp, Li Jinyan, who was secretly exchanging glances with Xiao Jinyuan, said indifferently, "We only need a truck. We'll settle the rest ourselves." Colonel Fong nodded. "That is a small matter, no problem at all." Colonel Fong looked at the military map again and frowned. "If you need to go to Kiki Prefecture, you don't have 8 hours of rest." They had to pass through 3 crossfire points, and there were unknown dangers along the way. 226 kilometers would take about 3 hours at normal driving speed. If there were some twists and turns along the way, the earlier they got up, the more relaxed they would be. Chapter 43:56. The Special Forces soldiers who had rested for less than an hour set off again. This time, they only needed to take care of themselves and reach Kiki Prefecture safely. Even the Special Forces soldiers who hadn't rested looked relaxed. Xiao Jinyuan found Yi Qian in the cafeteria. She was sitting in the corner of the cafeteria with a gun in her arms. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and she was fast asleep. Seeing that she was sleeping soundly, Xiao Jinyuan didn't have the heart to disturb her. However, they were about to set off, so he had to wake her up. Yi Qian woke up very quickly. Before Xiao Jinyuan could get close, she suddenly opened her eyes. Her gaze was as cold as an arrow and shot straight at the approaching man. After seeing who it was, Yi Qian closed her eyes again. Even her unnaturally furrowed brows relaxed, and a faint smile appeared on her lips. So was Captain Xia. Then she could continue to sleep. Her reluctant action made Xia Jinyuan sigh softly. He got down on one knee and squatted in front of her. His gaze lingered on her face, full of tenderness. Her hair was a little long, and a few strands of black hair covered her eyes. Xia Jinyuan reached out and brushed those strands of hair away with his slender fingers, revealing her full and delicate forehead. Just like him, she didn't wipe off the oil paint on her face to hide her true appearance. She was also a female soldier, so she would attract more attention. Before arriving at the camp, she deliberately applied another layer of oil paint. At this moment, the oil paint on her face was thick enough that it could be engraved. His slender fingers brushed her hair aside and slowly brushed across her face. His fingertips were warm, and there were traces of affection on his fingertips. Feeling his gentleness, Yi Jin couldn't help but tilt her head and rub against him gently. She was like a little bird that was greedy for his gentleness and couldn't bear to leave. His rough palm gently caressed her cheek. Xia Jinyuan, who was half kneeling on one knee, slowly leaned forward and planted a gentle kiss on Yi Qian's forehead. He didn't leave immediately, but stuck close to her. With his eyes closed, Yi Qian raised his hand and touched his face. He asked in a low voice, "Is everything settled?" Upon hearing her question, Xia Jinyuan raised his head and ended the affectionate kiss on her forehead. "Yes, it's settled. Don't worry. I'm afraid we'll work together again in the future. It's good that you're fine. Aren't you going to sleep? The canteen is quiet and there's no one there. You can have a good sleep." Yi Qian woke up from her deep sleep with a start. Her tired voice was still low, and it was obvious that she wanted to continue sleeping. Xia Jinyuan, whose fingers were still caressing her cheeks, felt his heart ache. He kissed her forehead, then her nose bridge, and occasionally her lips. He gently sucked on them with his teeth. "We can't sleep anymore. The transport plane can't enter Yeni City's air route. We need to go to Kiki State, which is 226 kilometers away. We have to leave now. You can sleep in the car, okay? The transport plane can't enter Yeni City's air route. We need to go to Kiki State." Yi Qian's sleepy brain suddenly woke up. Her eyes were no longer closed. She stared at the man who was gently kissing her. "Have we assembled?" "Not yet. We'll assemble in 10 minutes. There's still 5 minutes left." After ending their intimacy, Xia Jinyuan stood up first. He reached out his hand and looked at her with his dark eyes. "You can sleep in a car. If you're lucky, you can sleep all the way to Kiki State." Yi Qian grabbed his hand and stood up. She smiled and said, "That's impossible. Kiki State is more than 200 kilometers away from us. The entire Libya is in chaos now." Chapter 43:57. Therefore, Yi Qian could tell at a glance that he was trying to comfort her so that she could relax and not be so tense all the time. After arriving in this war-torn country, Yi Qian did not relax at all. In an environment where bullets could come from any direction at any time, it was difficult to relax. Xia Jinyuan always knew that his girlfriend was smart. He could not hide anything from her. It did not matter even if he could not hide it. She would know why he played it down. She knew him and understood him. After getting up, Yi Qian seemed to have thought of something. She slowly withdrew her hand from Xia Jinyuan's large hand. Then, she raised her eyebrows slightly. There was a hint of a smile in her eyes and 70% coldness. The atmosphere suddenly changed. Xia Jinyuan suddenly felt a chill at the back of his neck. He thought that, after sleeping with her, she would not settle the score with him. In the end, he was too naive. How could he not understand the little fox's personality? If there was a grudge, there would be a grudge. If there was a grudge, there would be a grudge. If there was a debt of gratitude, she would repay it with a debt of gratitude. Now, it was time for her to settle the score. "You bullied a man's feelings. Captain Xia, it seems that after being away for more than a year, your private life has been very interesting." Yi Jian, whose eyebrows were slightly raised, spoke slowly and unhurriedly. He enunciated each and every word very clearly. Colonel Xia's back was already drenched in cold sweat. Who was Lieutenant Colonel Xia? He was a man who wouldn't blink even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. Hearing this, he held Yi Jian's hand again, not allowing her to refuse. He used a little strength to prevent her from breaking free from his hand. He held her hand tightly. Their skin touched, and they could feel each other's body temperature. His deep, dark eyes stared unblinkingly at Yi Qian. His sexy thin lips slowly curled up. A smile slowly flowed out from his eyes. Little by little, the sentimental tenderness enveloped Yi Qian. Little fox, don't you know if I bullied a man's feelings? I've been away for more than a year, and I've kept my chastity. I'm just waiting for Little Fox to check the goods. Little Fox, if you really have doubts, why don't you check the goods when you return to China? In terms of shamelessness, Yi Qian had never won against Lieutenant Colonel Xia. It wasn't easy for him to turn the tables around, but in the end, he turned the tables around again. Chastity? Why was it so shameless to say such words? However, Yi Qian, who had received Lieutenant Colonel Xia's teachings, sighed with reddened ears. I heard you bullying a man's feelings. Captain Xia, did you take advantage of that man's feelings for you? Xia Jinyuan started coughing. He thought that if he used his trump card, the girl who had always been shy would definitely blush and retreat in defeat. In the end, she would admit defeat and never mention it again. Who would have thought that she would actually win it back? Incredible, incredible. The little fox was going to become a big fox. She was getting smarter and harder to deal with. He liked her more and more. Looking at her face again, the corners of her mouth were raised, her eyes were slightly narrowed, and the corners of her eyes were smiling. She looked exactly like a big fox who had done something bad to make her happy. The little fox had become a big fox. He was worried. Friendship is also a kind of relationship. That guy always thought that his IQ was higher than mine. In the end, not only did I expose his identity, I even secretly ordered him to work behind his back. He didn't even realize it and thought that I was stupid. Xia Jinyuan's smile was really evil when he mentioned the past and thought of the angry Luke. Yi Qian, who was looking at him, also pursed his lips and smiled. She liked this Captain Xia, who was very confident and calm. Chapter 4358. What should I do? Every time we meet again, not only do I not feel distant, I fall in love with him even more. Unknowingly, Yi Qian looked at Xia Jinyuan not only with a smile, but also with admiration. She liked Lieutenant Colonel Xia, and deeply admired this man she loved deeply. Being admired by the woman he loved greatly satisfied Lieutenant Colonel Xia's self-esteem. His slender fingers even rubbed her palm intimately. Seeing Yi Qian's hand shrink back from the tickling, Lieutenant Colonel Xia's smile deepened. His face was obviously painted with oil, but he still made Yi Jian's ears turn a little redder when he laughed. Painted faces were also very handsome. Who didn't like handsome faces? Yi Qian was no exception. Enjoying his girlfriend's admiration, Lieutenant Colonel Xia held her hand as they walked out of the cafeteria. His low voice was like the strings of a zither, pleasant and sexy. Now I finally understand that it's not me who's stupid, but him who's stupid. His self-esteem was crushed, and he lost his face. In his anger, he said something that could easily be misunderstood. You just happened to hear that sentence. What do you mean by bullying his feelings? He clearly realized that he was the stupid one. His self-esteem was crushed, and he couldn't accept it. When he left, his teeth were even chipped. Sigh. It's indeed difficult to admit that your IQ is lower than others. At this moment, Yi Qian expressed deep sympathy for Luke. Encountering the black-bellied and intelligent Captain Xia, she expressed deep sympathy for the Special Forces soldier who sent the signal flag. Thinking back, she was also crushed by Captain Xia's IQ. She couldn't guard against him, and in the end, she was taken down by him. Just as they were about to walk out of the cafeteria, Yi Qian stopped in her tracks. Her dark eyes sparkled as she looked at the man beside her. Yi Qian said worriedly, Captain Xia, if you continue to be so black-bellied, be careful that someone will put a sack over your head. It's really possible. His comrades in the Snowfield Brigade all said similar things. They really wanted to drag their captain to a corner and give him a good beating. Hearing this, Lieutenant Colonel Xia grinned, revealing a row of neat white teeth. Before that, I will teach them a lesson until their knees go weak when they see me. Yi Qian silently shut his mouth. He had white teeth and a ferocious smile. He looked no different from the ferocious beasts in the mountains. She didn't mention Luke anymore, and Lieutenant Colonel Xia's back finally stopped breaking out in cold sweat. He wasn't afraid that he would bully a man's feelings, because that wasn't something that would happen. He was only afraid that the little fox that had turned into a big fox would find out. He was often dragged by Luke to various places in Melbourne to drink. Although he only drank and didn't do anything bad, he would always screen himself from those erotic scenes. Then, he still felt guilty and short of breath. Fearing that Luke would yell, he quickly coaxed the big fox to leave. Fortunately, he was smart enough to coax the big fox away. Fortunately, he passed the test smoothly, and the big fox didn't ask any more questions. Walking out of the cafeteria, Lieutenant Colonel Xia let go of his hand and secretly wiped his sweat. In the future, he would never step into a bar. If he angered the big fox who was getting more and more powerful, he was really afraid that with her decisive personality, she would cut off all ties with him. If that happened, he wouldn't even have a place to cry. A man with a family Xia was afraid of his wife. It was glorious to have a family background. Yi Qian really didn't know that his intentional teasing had made Old Six a family Xia so happy that he would never enter a bar again. Even a leisure bar was blacklisted by Old Six, a family Xia. He had no choice. He couldn't lose his family background. Otherwise, he would be turning his back on his ancestors and would be spat on by his family Xia. Chapter 43:59. Yi Qian, who didn't know about his man's mental state, was still immersed in his admiration for the man he loved. He didn't even notice that the man who had let go of his hand was secretly wiping his cold sweat. Yi Qian felt that with Captain Xia's intelligence, he would definitely be able to tell who was trying to put a burlap bag on him. Preemptive strikes had always been his secret to victory. This was also why the Snowfield Brigade's Special Forces soldiers were trained to a pulp by Xia Jinyuan. Every time they said something ruthless, they would leave it at that, because they couldn't find a chance to strike. Before they could strike, they would be seen through by Xia Jinyuan. In the end, they would be the ones to suffer. After a few rounds of sparring, the Special Forces soldiers in the team no longer asked for trouble and behaved themselves. The veterans who had been with Xia Jinyuan for a few years knew that they couldn't afford to offend their handsome but black-hearted captain. However, the rookies in the team didn't know this. Xia Jinyuan, who had left the team for more than a year, returned to the base. The first thing he did was to train the soldiers. In his eyes, even if these soldiers had been in the Snowfield Brigade for 2.5 years, they were still rookies in his eyes. In less than 3 days after returning to the team, he had a complete grasp of the training situation of all the rookies. He listed out the areas that needed to be trained harder and the problems that needed to be corrected. He also called them out one by one during the assembly. The rookies thought that they were improving at lightning speed. Who knew that their mysterious captain would return? Damn, they were back to square one. This made them suspect that they had been sleeping and eating for the past 2.5 years. They hadn't even trained for a day. After walking out of the canteen and passing through the barracks, Yi Qian and Xia Jinyuan arrived on time. Lieutenant Colonel Fong and the others shook hands with all the Special Forces soldiers. When they shook hands with Yi Qian, Lieutenant Colonel Fong's eyelids twitched fiercely. He carefully sized up this female Special Forces soldier. He really didn't know that there was a female Special Forces soldier in a group of male Special Forces soldiers. The Special Forces soldiers who shook hands with him were all overjoyed. Finally, there was a truck covered by a waterproof cloth. They happily left the camp and headed to Kiki State to take the opportunity to leave. Lieutenant Colonel Fong watched as the truck drove away from the camp and said to Lieutenant Colonel Zhu, "I was really shocked just now. I didn't expect there to be a female Special Forces soldier inside." Lieutenant Colonel Zhu laughed. It's not strange that you haven't seen it before. There will only be more and more female special forces in the future. You have to know that sometimes female soldiers are more convenient than male soldiers. It makes people lower their guard. Indeed, female soldiers are not inferior to male soldiers. Of course, women can hold up half the sky. How can they be bad? Isn't the female special forces soldier who scared you the best example? In the future, there will be more and more, and our country will become better and better. At that time, let's see who dares to bully us. The counterattack against the non-militants this time is the best proof. After Lieutenant Colonel Zhu finished speaking, his resolute face revealed the sharpness of a soldier. Old Fong, we can stabilize from now on. If they dare to provoke us, we dare to retaliate. The truck was already far away. The two lieutenant colonels turned around and walked steadily back to the barracks. Once they were out of the country, they represented it. The country was not to be bullied. If anyone dared to cause trouble, they would make sure that they would not be able to return. In the truck that left the barracks, Xia Jinyuan, who was the last to get on, stepped over his comrade's long legs and squeezed into a corner to sit side by side with Yi Qian. This made Yi Qian, who was holding his gun tightly, lower his head with a reddened face. He was really racing against time to be with her. Chapter 4360. Xia Jinyuan squeezed over like a cat that had stolen a fish. His body was pressed tightly against Yi Qian, and a steady stream of his body heat was transmitted to Yi Qian. The small space was filled with his refreshing scent. Li Jinyan sat in the front passenger seat. The driver was a water ghost. 2 out of the 31 people, there were still 29 people squeezed into the truck. The truck swayed, and the people squeezed closer and closer. In the end, Xia Jinyuan shamelessly reached out to hug Yi Qian's waist while the light was dim in the corner. He had wanted to hug Yi Qian for a long time, but he never had the chance. Now that the chance was here, how could Lieutenant Colonel Xia let it go? Yi Qian struggled with his long arms around Yi Qian's waist. He glanced at his comrade sitting across from him, lowered his voice, and said through gritted teeth, "Let go." One of her hands was already wringing the back of her waist. She twisted the thin layer of flesh on the back of his hand 180 degrees, causing Xia Jinyuan's eyebrows to twitch in pain. The young lieutenant colonel was in so much pain that his eyebrows were twitching. This pain was nothing. Compared to being able to hug his girlfriend's waist, he was happy despite the pain. Don't move. If you move again, they'll find out. Lieutenant Colonel Xia, who was in pain but happy at the same time, didn't let go. He even tightened his grip, pulling her closer to his chest. You chose a corner to sit in. Wasn't it because of me? Be good. Don't throw a tantrum. There are too many people, and the seat is a little small. Just bear with it. Yi Qian was furious. He even changed the concept. She deliberately chose a corner for him. What seat was small? And when did she throw a tantrum? The furious Yi Qian twisted his fingers even harder, causing Lieutenant Colonel Xia to suck in a few cold breaths. Even so, Lieutenant Colonel Xia, who could endure what ordinary people couldn't, continued to endure. This pain was nothing. Don't hurt your own hand. My heart will ache. Lieutenant Colonel Xia, who was sucking in cold air from the pain in the back of his hand, maintained his composure. Even his voice did not waver. If Yi Qian had not heard the sound of him sucking in cold air, he would have thought that he had twisted the wrong person. She knew how much strength she had used. Seeing that he would rather suffer than let go, Yi Qian's heart softened. Even her voice softened. She moved her mouth to his ear and said helplessly, "If they find out, you'll have to explain. I won't care anymore. Let him be." If they were really discovered, she would face it with him, being found out by a comrade. Yi Qian thought about it. Perhaps it was because he was going to be a senior soon, so he wasn't as timid as before. So what if he found out? She didn't do anything bad. Wasn't it just dating? The people in the car were all comrades who had gone through fire and water together. It shouldn't be a big problem for them to know about it. As long as it wasn't discovered by others outside and used by people with ulterior motives, it would be fine. Although Yi Qian was in the military academy, she knew that the Du family had been playing more and more tricks in the past 2 years, especially on Madame Li's side. Commander-in-Chief Xia even personally called her to remind her that if Madame Xiao came to the military academy, there was no need to explain anything to her, and there was no need to be afraid. If her relationship with Captain Xia was discovered, the one who would be affected the most would be Captain Xia. As for her, with the Du family's temperament, they might not even take her seriously. The only person they really had to be wary of was Du Jiai. Xia Jinyuan's strong arm wrapped tightly around Yi Qian's slender waist. He chuckled softly. Why do you have to explain things like this to them? What they see is the truth. They're not stupid. Can't they see that I have to explain things to them? I'm a boyfriend who can't see the light of day. I need to see the light of day once in a while to declare my sovereignty. Chapter 43:61. Do I need to see the sun once in a while to declare my sovereignty? Yi Qian narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he had thought of something. After a short while, Yi Qian knew why he said that. It turned out that he did it on purpose for the Storm Commandos to see. Sitting opposite her were the scouts of the Storm Commandos, Sea Anemone and Seaweed. With their scouting abilities, they probably saw through Captain Xia's little trick. Yi Qian raised her hand to rub her temples. Fine, she would cooperate and stop struggling. It was a few hours' drive, and she could sleep on his shoulder with his arms. As for what Sea Anemone and Seaweed would think after they found out, she couldn't care less. Yi Qian, who was hugging the gun, stopped struggling. She then heard Xia Jinyuan say to her, "Sleep for a while. You'll have the energy to deal with it if something happens." Forget it. So what if they found out? It was just a relationship. She had a clear conscience. She nodded and replied softly, "You should rest too. We still have to change shifts with the Devil King later." The two team leaders were in charge of the entire journey. Li Jinyan was in charge now, and Xia Jinyuan would be in charge later. The two team leaders took turns sitting in the front passenger seat until they arrived at Qixi Prefecture. Yi Qian rested her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes to rest. After a while, she fell into a deep sleep. After a long period of operation and a visit from her relatives, Yi Qian needed to ensure a certain amount of sleep. Xia Jinyuan looked down slightly. With the dim light, he saw a smile at the corner of her mouth. Her expression was relaxed as she fell asleep. Her thin lips curved into a gentle smile. She was still smiling at Yi Qian, but suddenly Xia Jinyuan looked up and swept his gaze across the room. His gaze was sharp, and with a terrifying aura, he looked directly at Seaweed and Sea Anemone, who were secretly observing. They were so shocked that they felt as if a magnitude 12 earthquake had occurred. They thought that they had hidden well, but who knew that they would be caught red-handed by Xia Jinyuan? Seaweed and Sea Anemone, who were half squinting, were so frightened that their backs shivered. They closed their eyes tightly and didn't say anything else. Although they didn't look at each other, the two of them were secretly communicating. The two of them, sitting opposite of each other, had long realized that something was wrong and had been secretly communicating with each other. I'm sure now that they're a couple. Q King's eyes were clearly warning us not to spout nonsense. Sea Anemone scribbled quickly. Caught by a cold glance, he panicked. Why do I feel like he purposely let us see it? With Q King's cautiousness, he wouldn't do that. The words on Sea Anemone's palm stopped. Seaweed closed his fingers and wrote on Sea Anemone's palm. He deliberately let us see it. He wants us to know that Qing Miao is in his team and is his woman. He wants us to stop having any ideas about Qing Miao. He did it on purpose and expected us to find out. After receiving her comrade's words, Seaweed clenches her fingers and remains silent for a while. Then, she continues to write, have you noticed that the Devil King is also very different to Qing Miao? Does the Devil King also like Qing Miao? Seaweed wasn't the only one who thought so. The Water Ghosts and the Storm Commandos all felt the same way. Moreover, they felt that the two of them were quite compatible. If they could really become a couple, it would be a wonderful thing. Even if Qing Miao couldn't become a comrade in the team, it would be good if she could become the Devil King's girlfriend. Who knew? Their thoughts were all in vain. Qing Miao becoming their comrade. Impossible. Qing Miao becoming the Devil King's girlfriend. Impossible. Nothing was possible. Their thoughts were all in vain. They didn't know if the Devil King knew about the relationship between Qing Miao and Q King. How sad would he be if he knew? Sea Anemone and Seaweed began to worry about the Devil King. Chapter 4362. Sea Anemone and Seaweed were scratching their heads the entire way. They only hoped that when it was time to change shifts, the devil sitting in the front passenger seat would be able to sit in the car. Lieutenant Colonel Xia, who had achieved his goal, stretched out his long legs, held his girlfriend's waist comfortably, and closed his eyes in satisfaction. From now on, the water ghosts of the Storm Commandos would no longer have any ideas about Qing Yao. The water ghosts had their own ideas, his brother-in-law had his own ideas, and even Commander Dong of the Navy had his own ideas. Qing Yao was about to enter her senior year, and it was the most crucial time. He had to stabilize the rear. After all, he couldn't keep an eye on Qing Yao's whereabouts all the time. If there was a mistake and the commander of the Navy really poached Qing Yao, he wouldn't even have a place to cry. Old Man Xia was an old man who wasn't afraid of watching a good show. He had always liked to cause trouble. He had to nip all the signs in the bud to prevent new problems from arising. Xia Jinyuan, who was sleeping soundly, didn't care at all about the two pairs of eyes on his face. Look, no matter how you look, you can't see a flower in a flower. After a while, Seaweed and Sea Anemone retracted their gazes and looked at each other in silence. They had mixed feelings and closed their eyes to rest. You still want to have a good night's sleep? No way. They waited anxiously, even in a half-awake state. When the car came to a stop, the two opened their eyes and a light flashed past. It was time for the two captains to change shifts. Li Jinyan's slender brows were so tightly knitted that they looked like they were going to be knotted. He locked his cold gaze on the two scouts, pursed his thin lips, and asked, "Qing Miao is my younger sister. Do you have any other questions?" The sun was shining brightly above their heads, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder. It was so loud that Seaweed and Sea Anemone almost jumped 30 feet into the air while hugging each other. What? Qing Miao is the devil's younger sister. Seaweed was so shocked that his soul flew out, and his IQ flew out as well. He blurted out, "When did this happen?" He knew he had asked the wrong question. Qing Miao was the devil's younger sister, so she must have been the devil's sister since birth. How could it be that he recognized her as his god sister? With the Devil King's temperament, how could he possibly acknowledge a god sister? Before he could salvage the situation, Sea Anemone, his good comrade and buddy, succeeded in doing so. What? By blood? Cousin. Li Jinyan didn't want his comrades to know that he and Qing Miao were brother and sister. He didn't expect such a misunderstanding to occur. In the past, DeWale thought that he had feelings for Qing Miao. At that time, he didn't know that Qing Miao was his sister. It was only because he felt an inexplicable closeness to her that his comrades misunderstood him. Now that their relationship was still misunderstood after so many years, there was a need for an explanation. There was no need to explain too much. What was important was that it was easy to understand. Li Jinyan did not explain further and got into the car. Seaweed and Sea Anemone looked at each other. Libya was too chaotic, so they should hurry back home. Before getting into the car, Sea Anemone whispered, "Did we get into trouble?" "I don't think so. If the Demon King doesn't tell us, how would we know? Brother and sister are pretty good." Seaweed wiped off the sweat that had formed from the sun and got into the car. Sea Anemone followed closely behind. Yi Qian sat in the innermost seat as usual. The only difference was that the person next to him was his elder brother. The ones sitting opposite him were his comrades from the Snowfield Brigade, K7 and G3. Sea Anemone and Seaweed were terrified and didn't dare to sit opposite the devil. They were brother and sister, but they were stupid enough to misunderstand that the devil liked Qing Miao. Although the devil didn't say much, they still felt scared and didn't dare to get closer. Chapter 4363. The 200-kilometer journey was filled with devastation. The spreading flames of war had torn Libya into pieces. The country was no longer a country, and the family was no longer a family. The ones who felt it the most were the Special Forces soldiers who went abroad for the mission. Water Ghost, who was going abroad for the first time, felt it the most. The more he saw, the more silent he became. In the end, he hugged his rifle, his eyes dark, and he did not even say a word. When the Special Forces soldiers of the Snowfield Brigade saw this, they were very tactful and did not disturb them. This was a spiritual cleansing that they had to go through. After that, they would understand that peace was not easy and that they had a heavy responsibility as soldiers. The first crossfire point appeared, and the wireless communication was no longer electromagnetically silent. Everyone turned on their communicators, ready to jump out of the car and fight at any time. The waterproof cloth on the car was closed, and the entire car was opened so that the Special Forces soldiers on the car could observe their surroundings. The smoke in front was thick. Before the car entered the war zone, they could already hear gunshots and artillery fire. This was a civil war in Libya. The 31 Special Forces soldiers were not peacekeeping soldiers, so they had to choose to take a detour and not participate. The entire retreat route had been planned long ago, and the entire car was on alert. After that, they encountered a few more crossfire points in a row, and they chose to take a detour as well. They set off from 2 in the afternoon until 7 in the evening. After 5 hours, they finally arrived at Kiki State. Commander Dong and Major General Yang knew that all the Special Forces soldiers had arrived safely in Kiki State. The two Major Generals talked on the phone for a while before hanging up. Major General Yang was better. After all, the Special Forces soldiers of the Snowfield Brigade had gone abroad for similar missions many times, so he was already used to it. Commander Dong was different. It was not easy for him to train an amphibious Special Forces team, and it was their first time going abroad for a mission. From the second they went abroad, Commander Dong had been worried, afraid that bad news would come. He was so worried that even his hair had turned white. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. This amphibious Special Forces team had won their first battle, building confidence for their future development. The tail of the transport plane slowly closed, and Li Jinyan watched quietly. Deep in his cold expression, there was an undercurrent that no one else could see. The tail finally closed, and the transport plane began to fly. Li Jinyan received his gaze. He rested his head on the cabin and slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air from his chest. They had not failed their mission and returned safely. Come. Let's put our hands together and celebrate the first victory of the Storm Commandos. No one knew who got excited, but the cabin became lively all of a sudden. Since they couldn't get up and walk around, they all folded their hands together and cheered for the brothers of the Storm Commandos who had won the first battle. 1, 2, 3. Keep up the good work. Keep up the good work. A few people nearby clapped their hands, shouted the slogan, and cheered together. Yi Qian's hand was covered by Xia Jinyuan's large hand. Amidst the cheering, the two people's eyes met and intertwined like two intertwined branches. Captain Xia, I'm one step closer to you, she said with her eyes. Xia Jinyuan smiled. The paint on his face had been wiped clean, and the smile on his incomparably handsome face was faint and affectionate. He blinked slightly to show that he had read her eyes. That's right, my girl. You're getting closer and closer to me. I'm so happy that you haven't given up on me. You've been chasing after me despite all the hardships you've gone through. I'm so lucky that I've finally waited for your arrival. Yi Qian also smiled. His smile was like a flower, and he was devastatingly beautiful. She was also so lucky that she was finally close to him. Chapter 4364. After a transfer, the transport plane entered the Chinese border 21 hours later. The radar indicated that they had entered Chinese aviation territory, which meant that all the special forces on the plane had truly arrived in China. This time, the mission was special. They did not need to report directly to the military headquarters, return to the team, and write a report to the military headquarters. Therefore, Xia Jinyuan and Li Jinyan did not need to enter Beijing. After the transport plane landed at a military airport at the border, they returned to their respective posts at the military airport. Xia Jinyuan and his team will be the first to leave. They would take the military transport plane directly to the base. There were still 70 minutes before the departure time. All the Special Forces soldiers were waiting outside the military airport runway. Because this was an Air Force base, one of them was from the Navy, while the other was from the Army. Once they arrived here, even if they were dragons, they had to be careful. They were not allowed to go anywhere other than the designated area. Xia Jinyuan adjusted Yi Qian's helmet and collar. His deep voice mixed with the night wind. It was especially sexy. After I return to the base, I have some work to do, so I'll lose contact with you temporarily. I can't arrange for you to join the team this summer. I've already submitted the application form for the training camp I mentioned last time. The results are still unknown. Don't worry and wait for the news in school. Follow the military academy's arrangements during the summer break. If you have time off, go back to Beijing to visit Old Master. If you go to Family Xia, go visit them. Old Master and Old Madam miss you very much. As they were about to part, Xia Jinyuan felt that he still had a lot to say. He spoke whatever came to mind. No matter what he said, Yi Qian could tell that he was reluctant to part with her. She was the same. Whatever he said, Yi Qian nodded. He did not want him to worry about it. Li Jinyan, who was next to them, would occasionally look up at the streetlights in front of them. He only looked at them occasionally and did not disturb them. Xia Jinyuan and his team were the first to leave. He decided to let the two of them talk for a while. As the big brother, if he kept disturbing them, it would seem like he did not know what to do. He might even annoy his little sister. He did not walk over, not because he was afraid of disturbing them, but because he was afraid that Yi Qian would be annoyed. Under the street lamp, the tall and slender Xia Jinyuan stood in front of Yi Qian, who was 168 meters tall, making Yi Qian look especially petite. Yi Qian happened to be standing right under Xia Jinyuan's elongated shadow. From Li Jinyan's angle, he could only see Yi Qian's entire body shrouded by the street lamp. He couldn't see Yi Qian's figure at all. Yi Qian, who was shrouded in a black shadow, kept looking up. She had no choice. The man she loved was taller than her. If she wanted to see his face when standing close to him, she could only look up. Even his neck was starting to hurt after looking up for so long. Every time he saw Yi Qian raise his hand to massage the back of his neck after a long time, Xia Jinyuan couldn't help but want to laugh. He lightly flicked her forehead and teased, "Eat more. You're like a little bean. I really want to straighten you up, so that you won't get tired from looking up all the way to your neck." At Yi Qian's age, it was impossible for him to grow any taller. 168 meters was 168 meters. Sprinting up half a centimeter would be a luxury. Rubbing her forehead, Yi Qian also felt helpless. "Why can't you grow a little shorter? Every time we stand so close to each other, I'm the one who gets the most tired. My neck hurts. It's like a stiff neck. You're short, yet you complain that I'm too tall." The man who spoke raised his hand and gestured their heights. He was 189 meters tall, while Yi Qian was 168 meters tall. There was a height difference of 21 centimeters between them. Just by doing this, Xia Jinyuan realized that the height difference between them was surprisingly harmonious. It even made him feel sweet inside. Yes, there was even a trace of pride. Chapter 43:65. Yi Qian saw that he was still gesturing about his height. Amused, she lifted her leg and tried to kick his calf. She extended her leg, but she didn't manage to kick him. He even rubbed her head hard. Luckily, she had short hair. Although it was a little messy, it didn't become a bird's nest. Luckily, you're 168 meters tall. If you were only 160 meters tall, it would be difficult for you to kick me with your small arms and short legs if I raised my head and pressed it against your forehead. After rubbing her head, Lieutenant Colonel Xia, who felt sweet and satisfied, chuckled softly. At this moment, Yi Qian was pure and carefree. She was like a normal girl playing coquettishly in front of her boyfriend. She turned the cold and hard soldier on the battlefield into a soft and gentle person. His gentleness was all for her, and he was devoted to her. Yi Qian imagined the scene he had just described. It was so funny that she couldn't help but laugh. That's right. Luckily, she was 168 meters tall. Otherwise, she would really look like a little doll standing in front of him. She wouldn't be walking, but would be dragged along by him. Otherwise, he would have directly tucked her under his armpit. Her imagination was a little off the mark. The scene became more and more vivid. Qing's shallow laughter gradually turned into a bubbling laughter, causing her comrades to look over. Sea anemone and seaweed silently looked at each other, then at their demon king captain. Their demon king captain's gaze was murderous. God knows how many times he had killed Q King. His murderous gaze was very powerful. Just one glance was enough to send chills down their spines. They were afraid that the demon king would shoot Q King, who made Qing Niao laugh nonstop. Qing Niao was the demon king's little sister. Q King was indeed Q King. He actually managed to get the demon king's little sister. Did the demon king chase after him in the process? He probably did. Q King was the only one who could withstand the demon king's pressure and finally get Qing Niao. If it were any one of them, as long as the demon king's gaze swept over them, they would definitely tremble in fear and not dare to have any thoughts of betrayal. Li Jinyan's murderous glare had no effect on Xia Jinyuan. At this moment, he was shielding himself from everything around him. He only had eyes for Yi Qian. 70 minutes was very short. After the military transport vehicle was loaded, it was time for Xia Jinyuan to lead the team to board the plane. A soft kiss landed on her lips. Xia Jinyuan turned around and stepped into the cabin without looking back. Yi Jian, who was standing outside, held the helmet with one hand and caressed her lips that still had his warmth with the other. Finally, she waved goodbye. The transport plane took off and finally turned into a few stars and disappeared into the sky. He had already returned to the base, and she was about to return to the military academy. Xia Jinyuan and the Special Forces of the Snowfield Brigade directly transferred to the military transport vehicle at the Chinese border and returned to the base. They were the first to leave, followed by Li Jinyan and the water demons of the Storm Commandos. Yi Qian was the last to leave. There was no other way because there were no military planes heading to Xiang City. There were fighter planes, but Yi Qian was not a pilot and did not have the skills to operate a fighter plane with a pilot. Therefore, she was the last to leave. Li Jinyan and the others boarded the plane half an hour later. During this half an hour, Li Jinyan repeatedly reminded his sister about everything from life to studies. Yi Qian also nodded and listened obediently. In the end, Li Jinyan suddenly fell silent. Yi Qian, who was listening obediently, thought that he had finished speaking. In the end, she saw a trace of unnaturalness flash through her brother's usually indifferent handsome face. Even his cold voice was a bit tense and uncomfortable. You and Xia Jinyuan are both adult men. There are some aspects that you must pay attention to. You can't let yourself suffer losses. Don't cause any trouble in the last year. Don't cut off your future path because of a moment of happiness. Do you understand? Yi Qian blinked. She understood. She also understood why her brother was so unnatural. Chapter 4366. Li Jinyan's unnaturalness didn't disappear until he boarded the transport plane to the naval base in the south. His jawline was taut, and he used an ice-cold expression to cover up his unnaturalness. Yi Qian, who stood in place and watched the transport plane depart, lightly patted her somewhat hot cheeks. After a long while, the heat accumulated on her face dispersed. Captain Xia left, Big Brother left, and her comrades also left. In another 2 hours, she also had to leave. Arriving at Xiang City, it was already 9 o'clock in the morning the next day. Entering May, Xiang City began to become hot. Walking into the school, Yi Qian heard the sound of the students drilling in the sports field. The sound was loud and clear, and the momentum was overwhelming. The familiar sound, the familiar scenery, and the tiredness of the past few days were all swept away the moment he stepped into the campus. Returning to the dormitory, he finished freshening up, changed into the summer student military uniform, put on the military cap, and fastened the badge. Standing in front of the mirror, he once again tidied up the military uniform. Without resting, Yi Qian walked towards the teaching building. Reporting. Outside the classroom, a clear female soldier's voice was heard. The instructor, who was using the PowerPoint to teach, heard the voice and knew who the student reporting at the door was. The students in the class also knew who it was. 44 pairs of eyes looked over, and there was a joyful smile in their eyes. This was Yi Qian's classmate, a classmate for 4 years, and also a comrade in arms. That night, He Jing found Yi Qian. That night, Yi Qian's figure disappeared from the dormitory. For the next few days, the classroom, the dormitory, the sports field, the laboratory, and other places, there was no sign of Yi Qian. The students were already accustomed to Yi Qian suddenly disappearing once, twice, or thrice every semester. The disappearance wouldn't be too long, at most a week before he could come back. From the end of the simulation until today, counting the days, it was only 5 days. The instructor smiled and said, "Please come in." In the classroom, there was no other noise except for the instructor's voice. Yi Qian still hadn't returned to his seat. The students' line of sight was already on the PowerPoint, and they didn't pay too much attention to Yi Qian. It was an outstanding class, and its self-discipline was so strong that every teacher in the class admired it. After returning to school, Yi Qian was busy from the end of May until the middle of June. On the 18th of June, a group of foreign military school students came to the University of Science and Technology for an exchange. As one of the student representatives, Yi Qian received a call and rushed back to his dormitory. Today was the weekend, and the temperature was as high as 36 degrees Celsius. The military academy, in a rare show of mercy, gave the juniors and seniors a Sunday to rest during the day and continue their training at night. When Yi Qian came in, He Jing and Su were doing homework. When they saw her, they did the same thing and looked at the time at the same time. It wasn't time yet, so why did he return early? The flight was delayed? He Jing put down her pen and asked. Yi Qian looked at the two of them and finally said helplessly, "The instructor ordered me to wear a skirt." He said that the 2 foreign female students who came back this time were wearing military uniforms. As a female student, I also have to wear a military uniform. He Jing was stunned. Military uniforms. They seemed to have only worn them once in their first year, and after that they didn't wear them again. Suwen narrowed her eyes and looked Yi Qian up and down. If you wear a military uniform, then you still have to put on some light makeup. The instructor specially called, so it looks like the 2 foreign military beauties came. Suwen's interest was piqued. She stopped doing her homework and stood up with a smile. Come. I'll put on some light makeup for you. I've never seen you put on makeup before. I guarantee you'll amaze everyone." Chapter 4367. Even if you didn't tell me, I would still have to ask you to help me put on some light makeup. Yi Qian's temples throbbed with pain as she thought about the instructor's orders over the phone. She could barely accept wearing a soldier's dress, but as for light makeup, she didn't have any tools. Other than the sunscreen that Su had told her about her headache, she only had a facial cleanser, a bottle of facial cream that she would occasionally apply, and a bottle of toner or skin-softening lotion that she was afraid had already expired. As the representative of the students, she was still barefaced. She wore summer clothes, short sleeves, and long pants, and stood with the male students. The instructor who was still at the airport called the accompanying instructor. After finding Yi Qian, he ordered her to wear a female soldier's dress and put on some light makeup to welcome the military students from other countries. Yi Qian tried to argue against this, but it was to no avail. Yi Qian wasn't interested at all. He was just following orders. Suwon, on the other hand, was in high spirits. Come. Wash the water off your face. Sit down and don't move. Let me see if you need to trim your eyebrows. Suwon, who had transformed into a makeup master, held Yi Qian's face and said with a smile as she scrutinized him from left to right. As she looked and looked, Suwon only felt angry. She poked Yi Qian's bouncy and extremely white face with her finger. Then she pinched her own face and said angrily, "We're both born from the same mother, but why is there such a big difference? I even take care of my skin every day. Jing, look, I even have sunburn. Look at Yi Qian. It's so unreasonable. He doesn't even need to do anything, but his skin is still as white as a peeled egg. It's so white and translucent. I'm so angry that I'm about to pass out." Yi Qian's skin was like the Fu family's. His skin was very good and exceptionally white. His eldest brother, Li Jinyin, was exposed to the wind and the sun all year round. The water ghost would be tanned by God knows how many degrees, but Yi Qian's skin was like a white pearl mixed into a black pearl. Yi Qian was the same. He couldn't get tan no matter how much he tanned. Perhaps because Su Wen was so angry that she was about to pass out, He Jing, who rarely went along with her wishes out of friendship, came over to take a look. Her expression was a little serious. Yi Qian, who was sitting, knew that something bad was about to happen. At this moment, Su Wen only said that she was so angry that she almost fainted. When Yi Jing came out later, she would definitely be so angry that she almost fainted. In order to prevent a tragedy from happening, Yi Jian did not want to look for a female student who knew how to put on makeup at the last minute. She said, "Go and do the exercises quickly. Just let Wenzi do my makeup." Su Wen, don't be jealous. It's hard to give up on one's natural beauty. If you only care about yourself, you don't have a good foundation in your mother's womb. Hurry up and put on makeup for little Jian. Stop wasting time. No matter how much you dawdle, you can't become as white as Yi Jian. Just continue to be a black princess. That's good. Don't think too much about it. Thinking too much makes you even more annoyed. Su Wen was already very annoyed. She fiercely glared at He Jing. "Are we still comrades? Do you have any comradeship? Do you even know how to comfort people? Go. Go to your homework." She was so angry that she was about to pass out. He Jing, who sat back down to do her homework, didn't forget to pat Su Wen shoulder hard to express her sincere comfort. Su Wen gritted her teeth and replied, "Thank you for your comfort." For Yi Qian, the easiest way to put on light makeup was to put on some lipstick. Nothing else. For Su Wen, even if it was light makeup, she had to do it step by step. Yi Qian was adamant about not putting on any powder on his face. He Jing added, "It's hard to give up on natural beauty. You don't have a good foundation, so you need to put on a few layers. Yi Qian, I think you should just draw your eyebrows and put on some lipstick. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."